Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. It was raining. The smell of fresh rain always comforted him when he was sad or when he was so far away from home on a mission. Naruto had never told anyone this. Would probably never tell anyone, either. He wasn't one to open up to others. Well, he wasn't one to open up to people he didn't trust or like. It was just easier to keep things inside and away from the eyes of other people. It had been how he was taught all his life, even if it was just a short 12, almost 13 years. It was that same lesson pounded into his head. Emotion was weakness. Weakness was intolerable. And whereas a normal person would be aghast and horrified at the idea of teaching children to suppress their emotions, Naruto didn't complain. His caretakers, for lack of a better word, had given him food, clothing, shelter, and a means by which to defend himself. So, going along with the brutal, harsh training methods and styles was a small sacrifice. After all, the executioners were the oldest organization in the elemental nations, hunting criminals to near extinction using any method they wished, while also remaining completely neutral in the genocidal war going on between Tyrus and the religious province of Indiashka. And while a great many of the executioners were of Tyro nationality, a good few came from the religious state, as well. None of that really mattered to Naruto. He had been born in a time of horrendous bloodshed and war, and his earliest memory of growing up in the small backwater village he had lived in before being found and recruited was of watching soldiers of all nationalities tear each other apart, sometimes literally, like wild beasts. Such things had a way of numbing you, and he supposed that was what the training was for. Get used to cruelty, depravity, and brutality so it won't be as bad when you experience such things yourself. And the methods they employed to teach and train went hand in hand with learning to use the powerful internal energy that was chakra. To use it properly, that is, to not go insane and murder everyone around you, required intense physical and mental discipline. So much so that only 10 people every 30 years learn how to use it at all, and even then in incredibly specialized ways with limited abilities called jutsu. He had to suppress a shiver at the thought of that training. Even the normal executioner training, which had a 95% without aka dying rate, paled in comparison to chakra training. He and his 9 fellows had been hand-selected to receive the special teachings and chakra abilities of their forefathers. He was just unlucky enough to have been assigned the chakra of the 10-tailed wolf. Don't get him wrong. It was so powerful it could obliterate entire dimensions and allowed him to regenerate from wounds and harm of any kind instantaneously, but the power, like all powers, came with a drawback. He began to suffer from a horrible case of insomnia, sometimes going weeks without sleep, and developed a sociopathic nature. It was almost impossible, when including the training of both executioner and chakra-based, of controlling and suppressing emotion that he simply stopped connecting emotional lie with other things. Truly, he had absolutely no empathy for others of any kind. But none of that mattered anymore. He was free, or as free as being in a jail cell could be. What had happened was Naruto had gotten curious about what all he could really do with his chakra, so instead of asking the Captain as he normally would have done, he went and stole the forbidden scroll to see if there was any kind of information. He hadn't have anticipated that the first ability he saw recorded had been an interdimensional transportation technique, nor did he expect it to backfire and drag him, the scroll, and pretty much everything in his small room with him. What was most curious, however, was that as he was being transported, he idly thought he saw a giant red dragon in the rainbow of colors. Which was preposterous. Dragons had been extinct for over 2,000 years. When he had woken up from unconsciousness, it was inside of a jail cell for the city of Kuo Police Department. They had interrogated him 5 times already on his sudden appearance before he gave up and just stared at them until they left him alone to think on what to do. Now, his first order of business was to retrieve his weapons, armor, scrolls, and other assorted bits and bobs that had been transported with him. Easy enough. These people were pathetically weak, evidenced by the broken arm one of the officers now had after he had made the huge mistake to physically touch him. Second order of business was to find a place to stay and recover. Also easy. Abandoned warehouses and empty homes would be good enough for that. However, since he was in a jail cell, he decided to relax for a few moments. Having spied a mirror on the wall, mayhaps checking to see if the trip had done anything to him physically. As he examined himself, he made a few mental notes. He was still on the shorter side for his age, standing barely at 4 feet 9, although he made up for it with his thin, lean, muscled frame. His hair was still blonde and messy, shaggy from his decision not to have it cut a few weeks ago. His cheeks still had the jagged whisker-like scars going across them from his unfortunate run-in with a rather sadistic man by the name of Wolf, which had also cost him his left eye as well, with the remaining right one being a deep oceanic blue, although he did notice that his one remaining eye did have a dark set of bags under them. The police had let him keep his clothing, it seems, as he still wore his long-sleeved black shirt and black pants with his favorite white hoodie over it. The hood doing a good job of pushing his spiky bangs onto his forehead with his favorite pair of boots, the ones that had the orange straps on them, on. And so were his gloves as well. He liked these, too. They had orange straps as well. And finally, covering his missing left eye was a simple strip of cloth cut to work as an eye patch. His right arm was covered completely in bandages, hiding it from prying eyes. Simple and easy. Now, how to get out of this cell? XXX line break XXX. Naruto was rather happy as he looked up at the building he had chosen to be his home for the foreseeable future. Breaking out and retrieving his stuff had been amazingly easy. And, in some small part of him that he refused to acknowledge, he was actually disappointed. These were the people who were tasked with the duty of protecting the citizens of this city. Anyways, all it had really taken was to wait for the officers to fall asleep so he could pick the lock with his emergency bobby pin he always carried after the vault incident. His stuff had been unceremoniously tossed into an evidence locker by the police, and after a few moments, back in his possession. His armor mainly consisted of a metal plate attached at key points and bits of tactical gear attached to OTHs. All of his weapons, which consisted of 3 swords, several thousand kunai and shuriken, a first aid kit, and several scrolls containing all of his worldly possessions and the forbidden scroll, was secured to his person. Back to the present, the building that Naruto had chosen was located inside of a school compound and was fairly tall, covered in ivy, and very dark, if not a bit spooky. Naruto tilted his head a bit before bringing his hands up into a cross sign, causing 3 puffs of smoke to appear before they dissipated to reveal exact copies of himself. All right, we'll split up and cover the entire building. If you see anyone or anything of major interest, dispel. The information will come back to me so I can decide what to do with it. Naruto ordered in a quiet tone of voice. His clones nodded and began to slowly explore the building. XXX line break XXX. It didn't take them long to find the occupants of this building, all of whom were gathered in a central room. After going through a few options of introduction, the blonde decided to just do it and get it over with, like ripping off the arm of a mirelurk. Swift and relatively painless. After arriving at the door that his clones had indicated, Naruto reared his leg back and after a brief instant of channeling some chakra, kicked the door clear across the room, where it embedded itself in the wall. As he stepped over the threshold, Naruto idly took stock of the occupants. The first and most obvious were the 2 young women on the other side of the room. The first had long red hair and greenish blue eyes, wearing a sort of school uniform, which accentuated her large. The second had long dark hair tied up by an orange ribbon and purple eyes, wearing the same uniform as the red-haired girl, although her was slightly bigger than the redheads. Then there was the petite white-haired girl with golden eyes staring at him with narrowed eyes that belied her shock and fear, an emotion he was used to seeing in the eyes of others when it came to him. And finally was the handsome blonde that Naruto immediately dismissed as a threat. While he could sense a great deal of latent and dormant power inside of him, it was obvious that his fellow blonde was incapable of accessing it properly, thereby removing him from the threat list. Indeed, his senses were telling him that all of the occupants weren't exactly human, especially the white-haired girl. She reminded him somewhat of Yugito, the Jinchuriki of the 2-tailed cat, which took the form of a giant cat made of blue fire. Interesting. The redhead gave him a deadly glare that did little to affect him. He had seen scarier on the faces of both men and women who were many times more dangerous than her. Who are you? What are you? Which of the 3 faction are you from? Faction. Well, he was an executioner. What was he? As far as he knew, he was human. And it was kind of obvious who he was. He was Naruto. My name is Naruto. I have no idea what you mean by the 3 factions, and I am 83% sure that I am human. May I ask what your names are? The redhead replied hesitantly. He assumed she was the leader of the group. My name is Rias Gremory. Beside me is Akano Hamejima, my queen. By the door is Koneko Tuju, my rook, and Kiba Yuto, my knight. Why are you here? Naruto nodded and filed the names away. I am seeking shelter from the rain. I would be most appreciative if you allowed me to share your dwelling until it stops. The girl, Rias, gave him a look for his rather formal request before she nodded. I have half a mind to deny you, but if you tell me how you managed to make my door fly 3 in into the wall, I'll let you stay here. And so Naruto explained, in vague details, what he was and how he used chakra, which the girl, Koneko, winced at, to fight. At the end of it, Rias was quiet while looking at him in the same manner that a lot of politicians did after they saw him perform or fight, as if she were weighing his worth and value as a person. He didn't like that look. Despite his emotionally stunted nature, he still felt some kind of anger at being judged like meat. Finally, she spoke. Tell me, Naruto, do you have a family? Family. He didn't really recognize what the term meant, but from what he knew, it was a group of biologically related individuals who lived together. No, I do not believe I have a family. The other girl, Akano, asked him then, what about your parents? That he was familiar with. If you are referring to my biological donors, I do not believe I have ever met them. Rias gave a short nod, secretly disturbed by the clinical answers he had been giving, while Akano gave him a thinly veiled look of pity. And if I were to offer you a family and friends, give you a home? Naruto blinked and looked at Rias, idly noting that the blonde boy and the small cat girl had moved to either side of the red-haired girl. I would inquire as to what you would require of me to give in order to receive shelter. And again, Rias gave a nod and proceeded to explain all about devils, angels, fallen angels, and the evil pieces. At the end of the rather long explanation and several inquiries made by Naruto in regards to the duties of a peerage, he had a pretty good idea of what Rias wanted. My idea, Naruto, was to offer you a position in my peerage, thereby giving you a home and a family. The young blonde tilted his head. At the cost of, generally speaking, my freedom as well as my loyalty to become your personal tool for the destruction of your enemies, correct? Okay, so he was obviously paying very close attention when she explained the workings of a peerage. Not necessarily. All I would really ask of you is to fulfill any contracts that you are given and, occasionally, fight enemies who threaten us. And Naruto contemplated the offer. As far as he knew, Rias had absolutely no reason to lie to him or harm him. And even if she did, he was confident enough in his own abilities that he would be capable of killing everyone in the room in less than 13.76 seconds. And as long as she didn't start ordering mass executions, very well, I will join your peerage. What piece did you have in mind for me? Rias smiled at him and gestured with her hand, her remaining pieces appearing. Normally I would have an idea as to what piece to use, but I have no idea what area would be best. I figured I would let you pick. Naruto gave a curt nod and simply grabbed the piece he wanted. Rias raised an eyebrow before she nodded with a smile. Would you please lie down on the couch so I can start the ritual? XXX line break XXX. This place was pathetic. At least he thought it was. The people here were so weak and soft, so complacent in their supposed strength, that they forgot the age-old lesson of there is always someone stronger than you. So much so that they became little to no threat to him at all. Some of them had learned that lesson the hard way. Broken bones would heal, as would the other numerous injuries they had suffered at his hands. Did he really care? No. All that mattered was finding his charge and ensuring that nothing happened to cause any major damage while he tried to find a way back home. He just hoped the boy hadn't done anything too crazy. And if he did, well, let's just say it wouldn't be pretty and leave it at that. It had been 2 weeks since Naruto had arrived and joined Rias' peerage as a pawn. And in those 2 weeks, Naruto had been doing nothing but study this new world. If it was one thing that truly confused Naruto, it was the fact that devils apparently had 4 leaders known as the Mao. He wasn't criticizing it or anything. It just didn't make much sense to him. He had grown up his entire life having known, without a doubt, who he should obey. Having 4 leaders just didn't work for him. For example, what would happen if one of them gave contradictory orders to another, and the punishment for failing both was death or imprisonment? Whose orders did he follow? Mayor. It didn't really affect him all that much, he guessed. What were the chances of him actually meeting one of these Mao? It wasn't like Rias was related to one or anything, right? Elsewhere, a red-haired man sneezed before going back to plotting how to get closer to his sister, while his wife Zhu Ti shook her head. Currently, Naruto was sitting in the club room reading a few of the books that had been left for him to catch up on, which he did without complaint. From what he understood, Rias was going to be enrolling him in Kuo Academy after she got a good gauge on where he was at in regards to lessons, and that he had to stay in the clubhouse until she did, otherwise he would be in trouble for having him there. He really didn't care all that much. All that really mattered was getting on with his life and finding a way back to the elemental nations. He idly wondered if there were any experts on interdimensional travel he could speak to and have examined just what the Forbidden Scroll had said on the subject. He was brought out of his musings as Akano walked into the club room, her usual smile on her face as she did so. Hey there, Naruto. Naruto had no idea what to make of the girl, Akano. She was unlike any other female he had ever met. The same with Rias. Koneko at least had the same stoicism expected of tyrants, with the looks of a native of India's car. But Akano took the cake when it came to strange females. She often made comments that did little to progress the conversation. In fact, all they did was confuse him. Like when she had asked to see his sword. He, of course, thought she was talking about his blade, Nonobunko, and so he drew it from his back and presented it to her. She gave him a confused look all day after that. Hello to you as well, Akano, he said as he turned to her fully. May I ask why you are here? You have school, do you not? The raven-haired girl nodded as she sat down on the sofa next to him. Yes, but Ross wanted me to come by here and ask you some questions for your school records. And I thought I might also get to know you better and see just how strong you are. And also why Rias had to use that mutation piece to reincarnate you. She thought afterwards, thinking of the failed few attempts at first before they found the perfect piece for him. Ah, that made sense. What kind of questions do I need to answer for Rias? She pulled out a form and set it in front of him and he grabbed a pen to begin filling it out. After about 5 minutes of silence, broken only by his writing, he was finished and handed back the paper, turning back to the book He had just opened on the Fennec family. Akano looked at him for a moment before turning to the paper, reading the information he had written. Name: Naruto, no surname. Age: 12. Height: 4 feet 9 inches. Weight: 96 pounds. Hair: blonde. Eyes: blue. Parents: none. Siblings: none. Other than that and some basic information such as allergies, he had put down none. Hobbies: apparently he spent his free time training and some other basics. It was mostly blank. Why didn't you put down on the parents section who your parents were? The names and such. His reply was in the same monotone he usually spoke in. I do not know the identity of my biological mother or father. Okay, that was strange, but he had said as such when he had first arrived here, so. And you have no allergies of any kind? No, I have never been sick and I heal almost instantaneously from any wound. Though, I am incapable of regrowing complicated organs such as eyes due to the complicated optic nerve and the various small parts connected to it. I can and have regrown limbs and body parts. It was starting to get creepy the way he continued to talk in that same monotone voice. Especially about his healing. Oh. When did you need to regrow any limbs? For that matter, how do you know you can't regrow eyes and such? She definitely got a reaction that time. Naruto's hand shot up and began to rub his left eye patch while his one remaining eye narrowed to stare into space. A man named Val thought it imperative to test the limitations on my healing factor. His voice was like a frozen thunder then, and Akano shivered. All right, time to back up. Well, anyways, Rias asked me to test and see how strong you are. So, how would you rank yourself in your own way? I am listed as a SS class in the Executioner Bingo book. Naruto said as his frigid glare left, leaving the same blank look on his face. A SS class? Akano asked with not a small amount of disbelief. What is the ranking system in your home? Okay, This he could do. He had spent a long time memorizing everything he could about the ranking system. There are two systems. The first is the regular system used for private contractors and regular military personnel. And then there is the S-class system. Each one has different merits and operates side by side to each other. To start off in the regular system, there is E and D ranks, commonly referred to as cannon fodder. They are the weakest, most numerous ranks in the world. Then there are the C and B ranks, the people who are stronger than average, but not quite as elite as others, or officers as they're called commonly. And then the A ranks, the elite, the captains and generals of considerable strength. Then there is the S-class system. To be a recognized S-class, one has to have been recognized as an A- rank officially, but exceptions can be made, such as in my case where I was automatically declared an S-class. SS. Akano nodded, thankful she managed to get onto a subject he seemed to be quite talkative about. What is the difference between an S-class and an A- rank? How are they measured by? The measurement used by tournaments and events is that an A- rank is worth 2B rank, AB rank 2C rank, AC rank 2D rank, and AD rank worth 2E rank. As for the difference between an A and an S, he paused here and thought about it. A small crinkle in his brow as he frowned in thought. An S-class is worth, from my understanding, about 1,000 A ranks. Akano's eyebrows shot up at that. Really? Naruto nodded. Yes, really. Now, S-classes have their own ranking system based upon how many S-classes they are capable of terminating by themselves. It commonly comes down to this. SS class means that I am worth 2 S-class individuals. A triple S-class is worth 3 SS class. A SSSS class is worth 4 SSS class. A SSSSS class is worth 5 SSSSS class. And SSSSSS classes are worth 6 SSSSSS class. Anyone above the SSSSSS class is an abnormal and with an undefined level of strength, thereby keeping them from receiving a rank. We will get to them later. As it were, there are rarely, if ever, anyone capable of claiming a spot as a quintuple S-class, let alone a sextuple S-class, who are called the Four Monsters. At this current moment of time, there are only 10 quadruple S-class people, 3 SSS class, 10 SS class, and about 50 or 60 S-class alive. The abnormals, however, are recognized as the absolute epitome of strength and power, comparable to gods in mortal flesh. He winced alongside her at the mention of gods. They are beyond recognition in a normal sense of rankings and systems. They only come around rarely, if ever, in entire lifetimes, and even then they're called all-fathers. So far, by my recollection, there have only ever been 6 people to have ever even achieved that level of strength. The first 2 were Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, who were recognized as all-fathers at the same time since they were only truly powerful fighting side by side, giving them the same position at the time, meaning that they only counted as one all-father, both of whom founded the executioners a little over 1,000 years ago, maybe 1200 during the era of the warring clans, about 100 years before Tyrus was founded by August the Conqueror. The next was Hanzo the Salamander, who built the current system of recognizing strength and power. After Hanzo was a man named Nagato the __, who built the single greatest library to have ever existed. After Nagato was Tartaros the Bastard, who caused the Great War to break out between Tyrus and Indyashka after an incident involving the differing ideological beliefs about religion. After Tartaros, there was an absence of an all-father for about 150 years until Nobunaga the Strange came to the spotlight, where she then proceeded to revolutionize war by introducing firearms to both sides of the conflict. Surprisingly, she lived for around 120 years, still fighting on the battlefield. She only died around the time I was 3 or 4 years of age after she died under weird circumstances. And after her was he trailed off as his face hardened, the scars almost seeming to darken as he thought about the last all-father. Raizen the Thunderclap, who at the time of his appointment was the Grand Totalitarian General of Tyrus. It took a few minutes to absorb the amount of information Naruto just spewed at her, as well as his apparent hatred of the man named Raizen, and by that time Naruto had just returned to his book, apparently all talked out. Well, considering he had just spoken more than he had since his arrival, she wouldn't push him to speak more. Although she did get an idea. How do you rank our peerage in strength? He didn't even look up. C rank mostly. Kiba is at least a high D low C, while Koneko is a low to mid C. You and Rias are both mid C. Akano blinked. That was a rather blunt assessment of them if she ever heard one. And what makes us so much weaker than we are in your eyes? How can you tell if we are without having seen us fight? Naruto's answer was almost flippant and dismissive. You do not walk like people of great strength or power. What did her way of walking have to do with anything? As far as she knew, she walked with confidence. And just how do we not walk as if we have power? How can you even tell? When powerful, or even just strong, people walk, they unknowingly exude an aura of casual arrogance. Their stance, bearing, stride, and even their expression shows that they have nothing to fear from any attack. The young blonde said as he flipped a page. All of you walk as though every step you measured and calculated just how much grace and poise to put into it. All of you are self-conscious about what you are and about that information getting out to others. Humans cannot know about devils, angels, or fallen angels. Akano said, mentioning fallen angels with a bit of bite to her voice. If they did, it would only be a matter of time before they killed us all. Naruto stopped and looked up, his face blank, at Akano. Do you honestly believe that humans in this society will believe that a group of students were an alternative species? No, they would most likely ignore you and move on with their lives. Point to him for that. Changing subjects once again to something that likely wouldn't cause her to question all of her beliefs in regards to life as a devil, Akano asked him. Now, what about any abilities, skills, special powers aside from super strength? XXX line break XXX. He had tracked him to this school, which was fairly easy, all things considered. He had thought the boy would have more sense to cover his tracks up better. Oh. Well, can't change anything about that without getting him and putting him through the ringer to be better. And with a bit of his illusionary-based genjutsu, he managed to land a job as a physical education teacher. Now, all he had to do was wait for the boy to show himself. And teach these doughy kids the meaning of healthiness and avoid the glasses-wearing girl who had given him such sharp looks. And get a sandwich. Damn it, he was hungry. Naruto looked more curious than scared as he stood in front of the second-year class that Rias had determined he should be placed, ignoring the noise the girls and boys made at his appearance. The girls all had stars in their eyes as they looked at him. It was actually unnerving to him how intense they were. This was a situation he had never been faced with and he didn't have Akano or Rias to ask for advice in regards to it. He hid his discomfort easily and let his gaze move about the room. Only to see almost every male in the room glaring at him with hate and anger in their eyes. Well, now, something he was used to seeing and knew how to deal with. There was obviously no alpha in the room to ensure that all of the males were following the rules and regulations, so asserting himself as the alpha was most likely the best option. Class, this young man as will be joining us from now on. Naruto really disliked this teacher. The man was skinny and pale with dirty yellow eyes wearing a black suit. Something about the man just made his skin crawl, like he was in the presence of Valve again, only this time he was in less physical danger. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, would perhaps wish to introduce yourself. Just simple things such as likes, dislikes, hobbies, and future aspirations. The young blonde had no idea why Rias had chosen Uzumaki to act as his surname, and he assumed it was some kind of joke in regards to his name. She had two of them, after all. Naruto meant maelstrom and fish cake depending on how you wrote it, and Uzumaki meant maelstrom as well. So, either he was a magnificent storm or a whirlpool of ramen toppings. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen, Akano, wolves, and foxes. I dislike ignorance, disorganization, and fanatics. My hobbies include reading, gardening, and learning new things. My aspirations for the future are to find a way home and to find out what the meaning of a family is. Naruto said formally as he bowed, doing what the nice student council president, Sona Citri, said to do when she gave him instructions on introducing himself. I am in your care. The teacher, who went by the name of Koiki Shido, just gave a pleasant smile to the young blonde before gesturing to an empty seat behind a brown-haired boy who was one of the few males who weren't glaring hatefully at him. Now that is over with, please take the seat by Issei over there, all right. Naruto nodded and went to the seat in question, sitting and pulling his notebook out alongside his pen. No point in slacking off. XXX time skip XXX. All right, class, that's enough for today. It is now lunch time, so please use it wisely, Shido said with charisma as he left the room, letting the students pull their lunches out. Naruto put his pen down and looked at his notebook, silently glancing over the 3 pages worth of notes he took on the biology of lizards before nodding. Yes, he took adequate notes. Now he could eat the nice lunch that Akeno had so nicely prepared for him. Before he could even unwrap his bento from the cloth, he was suddenly accosted by several girls older than him, all talking over themselves. Or, look at him. He's adorable. Are those real whiskers? The eye patch gives him a look of danger. Kiba, Naruto, please be my baby brother. On and on they went until a firmer voice spoke up quietly, but firmly. Ladies, it seems to me that you're crowding him a bit much. Maybe you should let him breathe a bit. He had never been more thankful for anything in his life as he was not raised or taught how to deal with teenage girls. He was even more glad when the girls all backed off and left him alone. Naruto looked up to find himself looking at a rather attractive girl about 4 or 5 years older than him. She had long violet hair and light blue eyes, wearing the normal Kuo Academy girl's uniform. A pleasure to meet you. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. The girl laughed a bit into her hand, eyes mirthful as she responded. I know, I was there for your introduction in class earlier. My name is Sako Busujima, captain of the Kendo club. Kendo. Oh. Yeah, that stupid sport Kiba did as his extracurricular activity. Why they insisted on beating each other with sticks wearing pads, he had no idea. Granted, he had been beaten and had beaten others in his executioner training when he was younger, but it was without pads. The pain was a damn good motivator to not get hit again. I believe my friend Kiba is a member of the Kendo club as well. Sako raised an eyebrow as she brought her desk closer and brought out her own lunch. You're friends with the prince of the school. I'm sorry, it's just Kiba doesn't seem the type to befriend many people. Naruto gave a nod. Even he, one of the most socially ignorant and awkward people in the world, could see that Kiba was more of a loner than anything. I believe I am also friends with Kaneko Tuju. We have eaten lunch together a lot. When Naruto and Kaneko had first actually gotten to talk and meet, the white-haired girl had flat out asked if he used chakra. His answer of not by choice had initially confused her before she shrugged it off and asked him what his favorite candy was. She had been genuinely shocked when he had replied that he had never had candy or sweets before. She rectified that and converted him to a lover of chocolate Pocky. Sako just raised her eyebrow again at that. She was sure that when this kid had walked in he was going to be interesting, and from what little she had gathered from just a few sentences he had spoken, she knew he was perhaps the most interesting in the room. Also friends with the school's mascot. Well, if I knew you were this interesting, I would have saved you earlier. Naruto made to respond, but was stopped as an annoyingly loud voice entered the room, making the young blonde's eye twitch a bit. He hadn't gotten any sleep for the past 2 weeks, so his nerves were frayed horrifically. It was part of the reason he had been so short and strange during his conversation with Akeno. And he was reminded of this when that voice sounded throughout the room. Oi. Where's this kid I've been hearing about being in this class? The guy looked like the stereotypical punk kid with dyed blonde hair, wearing the school's male uniform. Only he wore slippers strangely enough. He was accompanied by people that Naruto knew were what Rias had described as the scum of the school. The leader of this group of scum scowled at them all and asked angrily again. Hey, I asked where the kid was. So, someone better tell me right now. He punctuated this statement by knocking a glasses-wearing, rather chubby, guy's lunch to the ground. Naruto narrowed his one eye at this punk. If it was one thing his trainers had failed to truly suppress in him, it was his desire to stop people from hurting OT. Her people for no reason. Hey, come on Sonoda, it's cool, man. We'll just get him later. One of the now named Sonoda's underlings tried to reason, only to receive a fist to the face. Shut up, Yamada, Sonoda said angrily. I want this punk in front of me in the next 30 seconds, and if he isn't, well, let's just say his little girlfriend, Kaneko, might suffer for it. At that, something inside Naruto switched, and his eyes hardened to a point beyond diamond before he quietly stood up, grabbed his nice bento made nicely. Why buy Akino just for him? And walked to the chubby boy, attracting the attention of everyone in the room from his movement. Stopping in front of the boy, Naruto extended his hand that held the bento out to him, and in his nicest voice as Naruto was probably capable of, which still came out as a flowy NG river of monotone ice. Here, you can have mine since yours fell on the floor. The boy just looked at him in shock as Sonoda walked up to the much smaller blonde and smirked arrogantly. Hey, you little, I heard all about you today. How you were supposedly some kind of prodigy and got to skip a couple grades. Think that makes you the, ha. Makes you better than us, ha. What do you got to say to that, punk? Naruto just looked at him for a moment, then he replied in the same monotone as always. I do not think I am above you just because I got to skip a few grades. I have worked very hard to get where I am. It wasn't necessarily a lie, either. He had worked hard to become who he was today, and failure was not an option in the executioners, but apparently, something that he had said managed to get to Sonoda as he angrily snorted and glared hatefully at the blonde. Yeah. I think you do think you're better than us. Well, maybe if you got on your knees and bowed, we might be inclined to forgive you. Bo. Naruto had to actually fight to keep a scowl off his face. This worthless piece of, expected him to bow. He would never, ever bow to anyone. It was like his mentor had said once, the only person you ever bow to is death. And even then, Naruto would probably abstain from bowing. He was going to make damn sure that this sentiment was translated to this worthless pile of, his voice got colder as he subtly began to pump some of his 10 tails chakra into the air, making the shadows seem bigger before he made direct eye contact with Sonoda. And then the older teen saw his death in that cold orb. His instincts kicked in and all of a sudden he threw a punch at the younger boy, bringing a startled gasp from the group around them. It was all for naught as Naruto caught the fist and crushed the fingers, hand, wrist, and lower forearm easily. And then the door opened, revealing the visage of Shido, a sick grin on his face as he took in the sight of Naruto squeezing Sonoda's hand past the breaking point. His eyes gleamed malevolently at Naruto while his mouth curled upwards even more. Well now, what seems to be the problem here, gentlemen? XXX line break XXX Sona about the newest member of the teaching staff at Kuo. Which, given her capacity as the student council president, made a good deal of sense. However, given what she could sense of the man with her inherent devil powers, who had been hired not even a few weeks ago, well, she had a cause to be concerned. And it wasn't just him, either. The newest member of Rias Peerage, who had been given a rather strange mutation piece, which Rias still refused to tell her the value of, felt exactly like this man in regards to the strange energy he used, except this man's couldn't be sensed by her. Really, it was like every time she tried, all she got was a blank space in the area he was, while knowing he was filled with it. Not only was it disconcerting to feel that, but it also made the man very dangerous. If he could suppress almost all of that power and still exude an instinctual feeling of danger, then just how powerful was he? So now, here she was watching from the rooftop as the man started his next class of the day. He was handsome, she would give him that, in a rugged, scoundrel-like manner. His hair was a deep steel color, and he somehow managed to give it a cropped yet shaggy look to it, which only enhanced his ruggedly good looks. His chin was covered in stubble, and his eyes were a sharp onyx color, catching anything and everything in front of him. He was wearing a normal set of clothing for this class, just a tracksuit, really, colored black and garishly pink for some reason. From what she had gotten by asking the people who had taken his class, he made it very apparent that garish colors were his favorite for some reason. From those same people, she also got a bit of information on him. He claimed his name to be Washijiro Wakajeda, and that he used to teach gym to students in Tokyo. He was never married, was 28 years old, and was a self-proclaimed pervert, having been raised by his godfather to be as such, a man named Jiraiya Gamasenanan. All of this checked out officially from what she had dug up. All of his papers and official documents checked out, but something about the man had her on edge. When she brought it up to Rias, the redhead shared her concerns but had more pressing matters to attend to, such as trying to make sure that her newest peerage member didn't do anything ridiculously violent as his actions when they met showed he was capable of. Sona sighed before she turned and left. She wouldn't get anything from stalking Wash Sensei, as he liked to be called. Little did she know that she was being followed by his onyx eyes as he gave instructions for the next game. It was official. Naruto absolutely hated Shido Koiki with a passion rivaling that of the sun. It had been about 3 hours since he had crushed Sanada's hand, which he didn't regret, and also 3 hours since he almost got kicked out of school by Shido, which would have happened had Sako, the chubby boy who was apparently named Kota, and the brown-haired boy Issei all standing up for him. But, because of Sonoda being the son of an apparently big-time businessman, Naruto now had to serve detention with him in the new P coach after school. And while he normally wouldn't have cared all that much, and he would have sent a shadow clone to serve it for him, Rias had gotten wind of it and basically made him go to detention. Which was unfair because he did a good thing and was getting punished. Although, now that he thought about it, her anger might have been more directed at him because Sonoda had a shattered hand and wrist than anything. The blonde pushed a snort down. If the idiot had been stupid enough to antagonize him, then he was lucky he didn't rip the arm off and beat him to death with it. He had done it once, too. Though he could say he was at least curious about who the new gym teacher was. The man's first name, Washidaru, brought up a feeling of remembering, yet not at the same time. He was familiar with the name, but he couldn't place it anywhere. So now here he was, waiting for the two teachers to arrive with his arms crossed and eyes closed. Really, they tell him to be there after school and don't even have the honor to show up on time. He heard footsteps then and turned, looking at the man beside Shido in concealed shock. Oh, he knew that man. He knew that man very, very well. It was the same man who had basically become the closest thing to a father to the young blonde since he had first picked him up from the training camp a little over 4 years ago. This was the captain. Well now, it seems Naruto has deigned to arrive a little early, hasn't he? Shido said with a smirk on his face. Well, Naruto, this is Washidaru-sensei, the new physical education teacher here, and the man who will be serving your punishment to you. It was obvious to the other two males that he held quite a bit disdain for both the man and the position, but Washidaru didn't react in any way to it. Please call me Wash-sensei, Naruto. Naruto nodded, keeping his eyes trained on the man. Yes, Wash-sensei. Well, since that's taken care of, I will be taking my leave. Papers to grade and whatnot, Shido said as he walked away. It was silent as the two stood there, neither moving before Wash turned and gestured towards the woods. Naruto nodded. It was best if their conversation had the lowest chances of being overheard. They departed and after a 5-minute walk, they stopped and turned to each other. Wash's amicable attitude immediately frosting over and becoming cold. His voice was soft, yet freezing all the same when he spoke. You've done a very bad thing, Naruto. I did not mean to do anything wrong. Naruto stopped when he saw Wash looking at him the same way with his icy stare. Naruto, the man began. Do you want to know what you did to cause me to be here? Naruto nodded meekly. Damn it. Yes, sir. Wash began to pace, hands clasped behind his back as he did, while Naruto instinctively fell into parade rest. Not only did you steal the forbidden scroll, you used it for the selfish desire of power, only to wind up activating an interdimensional transportation seal. Not once during his small speech did the man's voice raise or lower. It remained the same even tone that showed just how angry he was. Captain, IA raised hand stopped him and he fell quiet. Oh. Yes, the captain was very, very angry. Now, we are stuck in an alternate dimension filled with all manner of different beings. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't gut you right now and let you bleed to death, boy. Okay, yes, he needed to avoid that as much as possible. Not for him, no, but because Rias would definitely find out and try to retaliate. He says try because the captain may not have been as powerful as Naruto was, but he sure as, was way more experienced and skilled when it came to fighting. If Rias sent anyone after the captain, then they would not be coming back. But he didn't have an excuse. I have no reason, Captain. I will accept any punishment you give. Wash sighed tiredly as he rubbed his eyes. He was way too old for this, Naruto. I have no intention of punishing you. He saw the shock and gave a short bark of amusement. The only reason I'm here is because Lord Razor is furious that you left. As the Allfather, He is the de facto leader of the executioners, and you being a member who left without a trace makes you a danger. What were your original orders, Captain? Naruto asked, silently relieved he wasn't going to be punished. Wash gave a grunt as he answered. The orders were to find you, kill you, retrieve the Ten Tails chakra, and come back. But since I have no intention of doing that, well, things get tricky. How so? Because you and I are now loose ends and Razor hates those. Be on the lookout in the future for any kind of suspicious activity in the area. Naruto opened his mouth, not related to devils in the supernatural, and he then closed it. Very well, Captain. Now go home and do whatever you do at night. Although, Wash trailed off in thought as he gave a hum. How far into your training are you? Destruction still hurts me badly, at least physically. I can use my other abilities proficiently enough, though. Naruto replied. That was a bit of a kick to the nads for him. Destruction was one of his strongest abilities. It was literally a wave of energy that destroyed the bonds between molecules and turned it to ash. The only downside to it was that the longer he held and used it, the more damage his body endured. The last time he used it for more than 15 seconds, it had caused most of his internal organs to rupture and bruise, laying him up for a good week. Wash narrowed his eyes at that. Just proficiently. A gulp and nod was what he got. The captain was a scary man. Well, it seems like we have something to do then. We will train like we always have, only this time to master to perfection all of your abilities, including the destruction. The captain gave a fang grin at that. And you can tell this devil girl that she and her friends can join us, too. After all, I think they would be very interested in knowing just what kind of training we do. Naruto silently hoped that Rias would forgive him for the hell he had unknowingly let loose on the peerage. He had spent years training with the man, and he knew just how much of a perfectionist and how high his standards were when it came to training. He winced as he felt the phantom pains of past training sessions he had had with the man. It was a standard practice of the executioners to send the ones who managed to make it through the not so affectionately called Camp Darwin to older and more experienced executioners to learn from them and get real-world experience. Yes, Captain. I will tell them. Now. And then the captain shifted and set his gaze on the blonde. Since we're out here anyways, why don't we see just how rusty you've gotten with a simple game of tag? This time, Naruto whimpered out loud. Disconnected from emotions he may be, but he still understood the meaning of pain. Especially when Wash spoke again. And guess what? I'm it. XXX line break XXX. Koneko frowned as she smelled Naruto walked back into the club room, covered in dirt and grime and smelling like he had just ran straight through a literal shitstorm. She frowned even more when she picked up the descent dried blood on him. Turning from her spot, the hidden Nekomata blinked as she saw his torn uniform and dirt and stick-covered form. Damn, whatever detention he had with Wash-sensei must have been horrible for him to look like that. Oh, how little she knew. Rias frowned as she looked at Naruto. She had to concur with Koneko though. Whatever Wash-sensei did to Naruto during his detention managed to make him look like he fought a tree and lost badly. And to make matters worse, Naruto was tight-lipped about it, aggravating her further until she just sighed. Fine, I won't push it. But please, take off those shirt and pants and please wash them. She should have been more exact when she gave that order in hindsight, because right then and there Naruto began to strip. Before she could stop him, Naruto had his upper clothing off and his pants at his ankles. And by that time, Rias was too shocked by what she saw to even get angry. She had known Naruto was healthy and strong physically, but damn. It was like his body had been sculpted out of marble. She wasn't even entirely sure that a 12-year-old was capable of having that compact and defined muscles. His abs looked like she could grate cheese off of them. And while it was shocking to see all of those scars, what shocked her and her other peerage members were the sheer amount of scars all over his body. Big and small, some located over vital organs and some not. He had all kinds of scars. Some of the more notable ones were located on his chest and back. Although she did notice some around the joints of his fingers and toes. Some of the more notable ones included a jagged X-shaped scar that had one bar go from his right shoulder to his left, and the other bar went from his left shoulder to his right hip. Right next to his heart was a jagged fist-sized hole that, from the look of it, went directly through to the other C. At his stomach was a thin, perfectly round scar that circled all the way around his waist, as if he had been cut in half at one point. Naruto, who obviously didn't mind being in his orange boxes, just sat down and grabbed some of the tea and snacks Akano had made prior to his arrival in the clue. What? He hadn't eaten all day, and while he had gone more than once for an extended period of time without food, now that he didn't have to eat as often as was deemed appropriate. Rias just sighed and looked at her youngest peerage member sadly as he munched on a cookie. She had known from their conversations that he had lived in a very horrible place, but she didn't know that it was this bad. Now she just wanted to hug him and make sure he knew he was safe. Naruto, where did you get all of those scars? How did you get them? Naruto just thought and replied, most of them from training. Although a good number of them I got after I met Wolf. Rias gave a shiver at the barely suppressed hatred in his voice for this Wolf person. Whoever that was must have done something incredibly horrific to him for Naruto to truly hate him. Well, do you know where this Wolf person is? Maybe we can find him and know, Naruto said with a surprising amount of authority. Wolf dropped off the map after some disturbing things came to light in regards to his personal life and actions during his service as an apprentice for Orochimaru, a scientist under the employ of the Tyran military. And even if you did find him, Rias, Wolf is, while not as powerful or even the most powerful, a credible and tangible danger to anyone who is his opponent without powerful backup. The Gremory heiress nodded at that, filing it away for later. You're speaking from experience. Naruto nodded his head as he looked out the window at the blue sky, all the while rubbing his bandaged arm. Wolf is a bad man, as bad as they come. He'll do anything to achieve his goals. And what are his goals? Exactly. His eyes had become disturbing and empty when he looked back at her. And when he spoke, it was so soft and empty Royce began to worry for his mental health, and not for the first time. His goal is to know everything in the world. That was weird. He wants to know everything in the world. Yes. Wolf is a prideful man. Very, very prideful. He absolutely hates not being the best at anything, and to ensure he is the best at everything, he wants to know everything. Naruto answered with a shrug. All he really is a man who feels inferior to others for some reason. He's a dime a dozen, but he managed to get power to back his pursuit of superiority up. What makes him so dangerous, then? The fact that, at least to him, there is no such thing as an uncrossable line. XXX line break XXX. He wasn't an entirely vain man, at least he believes so, even if others disagreed on that part. But, when you're this handsome, who could blame you? Oh, how he loathed his current appearance. But, for the sake of cover, for the sake of staying alive, he would deal. Yes, he may have lost a good deal of the physical strength he had back in Tyras, and his connections in politics and the higher-ups in the food chain had all but become worthless here. But he was safe for the time being, and that meant he could plan. He never rushed that process. Oh, no, it would have been too easy and foolish to make any kind of mistakes. If he rushed, he could miss minute details, details that held more value than others would believe and understand. A pawn was worth quite a bit at the end of the game, after all. Although, he had hit a few bumps in the road, nothing he couldn't sort out, anyways, but still, bumps were unappreciated, if expected and planned for. But, a big shock had come to him when he had learned that the 10 Tails was here, as well. That he wasn't expecting, but he was nothing if not adaptable. He had to be, of course. The game was always and ever changing. Only fools and the ignorant stuck to rigid battle doctrine and never changed. Only fools and the ignorant discarded tools as worthless or broken after a single failure. Which was why he was furious when the 10 Tails had slipped from his possession not once, but twice. And all because his subordinates didn't have the same patience he did. He had played the game for far too long to simply rush forward and hope for the best. No, he would make sure that the 10 Tails came into his possession again. A failure he may have been, but he was a failure that could be fixed easily. And for all of the resources he had poured into his current state, both open and hidden, simply throwing the boy out because he had failed to meet the expectations of one underling would be stupid. He cursed under his breath slightly as he reclined slightly in his chair. That man had simply one job. Learn the power and limitations of the 10 Tails, extend a hand of friendship when he inevitably got stuck in his efforts to gather strength, and then the boy would willingly come into the fold. But no, He had to do it directly without a single thought of subtlety, and it had nearly brought a ruin to everything. The door opened and the sound of shoes hitting the floor met his ears. They stopped in front of his desk and he turned to regard the male with a smile of familiarity. Best not to show his annoyance with him right now. You could only push people so far. Ah. My friend, back I take it. Would you care to report? Of course, came the reply in the steady voice he was known for, the small hint of glee hidden well in the tone. The girl was oh so willing to work with us for the time being. Her companions, aside from the man, were a bit more hesitant of our offer. But they went along with it regardless. He waved that away. They're of little to no importance to me. What does concern me is her apparent obsession with obtaining these sacred gears. Do you perhaps know why? Yes. Stroke his ego a bit by letting him flex his knowledge. Let him think he was his equal if only for a few moments. These sacred gear are like the chakra of the Jinchuriki. Each one is different and adjusts and changes in regards to the user. They were created by this world's god. He didn't even try to hide his sneer at that to help humans combat these devils. Interesting. He would have to find one of the sacred gear wielders and dissect them for study. And which people, pray tell, does she know of who have these sacred gears? One she knows of, a girl who will be arriving in the city within 2 weeks. The other is a boy, Issei Hyaudu, and she only has suspicions about him. Was the answer. Issei Hyaudu, he didn't see it. Oh. Well, alert the others. Have them watch for any signs. Tell our associate that we will be observing him as well. If they decide to move, we will be there to assist if need be. A nod. And the others. I know most of them are getting fidgety about waiting. They want action. Let them wait. It will make it all the better when they actually do get what they want. Oh. How it was simple to manipulate him to do what he wanted. Dismissed. Go back to their hideout and do as I've told you. He nodded again and turned, already halfway across the threshold when he was stopped. And Tenran, please tell Wolf that if he jumps the gun, as they say, again his voice got colder as Tenran began to grin to an insane degree. Quote, I will personally ensure that he spends the rest of his life begging for mercy I will never show. The now named Tenran nodded, his large frame barely passing through the door as he did. Oh. How it was good to be the boss. XXX line break XXX. It wasn't often that Midlet felt that what she was about to do was wrong. Midlet was a pretty young girl around the age of 13 who wore a gothic Lolita style of clothing, which consisted of a black dress with white frills, a large black bow on the front, thigh-high white socks, black shoes, and a large black bow on her head. She had blonde hair pulled into twin tails and blue eyes with a single scraggle tooth that she beat anyone who commented on it about. She wasn't normally this hesitant about doing the things that Reiner asked her to do, but since she shared these same concerns with Carla Warner as well, she felt they were justified, even if Reiner was too blinded by her own pride to see just how bad these guys were. These doubts had only started when she got to meet the people that Reiner had been speaking of for quite some time. She had only ever spoken to 2 of them, the ones called Tenran and Wolf, but it was enough for her to realize just how deep they were in associating with them. Tenran was physically scary. He was massive, maybe a little past 7 feet in height with a heavily muscled, yet still skinny build. He was mostly bald with a trimmed goatee on his chin, wearing a black jumpsuit underneath red-plated armor, a massive war club hanging over his shoulder, 3 thick and heavy metal rings wrapped around a thick black pole. His beady and harsh gray eyes screamed insane happiness when he had first been challenged by one of the rogue exorcists, a man named Fried Selson, under their employ. His smear was still over by that wall over there. As for Wolf, he was just scary, even if he was physically attractive with his lean, wiry, and muscled frame, wearing a white button-up shirt under a dark blazer that contrasted his dark jeans and brown loafers well. His hair steely gray hair cropped and combed perfectly, while his blue-gray eyes held a deep and dark intelligence to them. If it hadn't have been for his cruel demeanor and complete disregard for even the barest hint of morals of any kind, she would have been smitten. Not to mention his intense, all-consuming obsession with knowing everything he could. They had lost both rogue exorcists and fallen angels to his sick experiments, of which she wished she hadn't have been forced to watch. Oh. Yes, Midlet had her doubts and hesitations, but as Wolf had put it oh so simply when they had arrived, cross us in any way and you will beg you're worthless, Impudent God for mercy. Then, we'll let Jackal have his fun with you. What kind of people did Rainier ally them with? Was gaining power really worth allying with people who talked so casually of horrendous and cruel things? Was it really worth making an enemy of the Gregory? Of abandoning them? Yeah. Working for the Gregory wasn't a good way to gain power fast, but at least they had food and beds and were safe. But now she had to worry she would be chosen by Volv to act as his bedmate should he tire of Rainier. And she had seen the scars she accumulated after each bout. Maybe she should run away. Yeah, she could do it, too. Besides, she was going on a mission to observe the nearby devils, more specifically the new one named Naruto Uzumaki, and get as much information as she could out of him. It was a better mission than the one Rainier was on. At least she didn't have to seduce and go on a date with a pervert. It wouldn't be a stretch for her to disappear, right? To run away and live her life alone and in peace. XXX line break XXX Wash looked at the assembled group before him with a flat, dry stare. If this was what Naruto had spoken of when he mentioned that they were mostly C rank, he would have to disagree. They were barely able to pass as D rank. But then again, Naruto had known them for longer than he had, so he probably had more of an idea on how good they were than he did. That would change after his spar with Naruto, though. The rules were simple, though. No just, but chakra use was allowed. Wash wouldn't go for immediately life-threatening hits, and Naruto wouldn't use any of his more deadly abilities. The two faced each other. Naruto tensed and ready. Wash relaxed and calm for Rias to start the match. Wash was calm because he knew he could beat Naruto. It wasn't that he had more raw power than Naruto, or that he was faster or stronger, but because he had way more experience in fighting than Naruto did. He had sparred and fought with some of the strongest chakra users ever. He knew the limitations they imposed both physically and mentally. You see, when a person gets access to chakra, they develop a series of small biological tubes, for lack of a better term. These tubes expanded and strengthened, like muscle, with use and time. However, there was a limit, known as the chakra capacity, of how much chakra a person was physically capable of having inside them at any given moment. This capacity grew as they trained and used it more, but once it hit its peak, that was it. Then there was the chakra pool, the overall amount of chakra a person could generate in a 24-hour period. It ranged anywhere from a small to holy, __, in size. Naruto had an amazing amount of chakra in his pool. Really, it was a ridiculous amount. So much so that his capacity suffered for it. He had little to no control over his massive stores, and therefore his capacity remained relatively small. Yes, it refilled fast, but there was a single minute of time in between his drained and filled states that he was completely incapable of overpowering him. And with the way Naruto went through chakra, Wash really had nothing to worry about. Rias stood in between them with her hand in the air before bringing it down swiftly, shouting, "Begin." Before leaping away, Naruto made the first move and blurred out of sight, only to miss his Wash ducked under the expected rear attack, and then be thrown brutally across the field by a simple grabber. ND throw. The blonde rolled and drew a single kunai before sending it sailing at the older man, only to blink as it was caught and thrown back. Wash mentally counted down how much chakra he had, -97%. He ducked and channeled more chakra into his limbs to move faster and hit stronger before blurring again and activating his cloak of chakra, which looked like a wolf of energy around him. 47%. Wash sighed as he closed his eyes. While Naruto was very good at being unpredictable in a general sense, he tended to repeat failed maneuvers and correct them on the fly. He was sure he had beaten that out of the boy by now. And he knew that the initial chakra cloak cost more chakra as it went on. 29%. He caught the fist aimed for his kidney and brought his elbow down on the joint, breaking it cleanly with a sickening snap. And in the single second Naruto blinked in shock, he brought his other fist forward into his face, breaking his nose cleanly while the cloak dissipated. 11%. Naruto then twisted to the side and stabbed at Wash's stomach, only to be sent back once again across the field by a backhand. Standing up one more time, he blurred out of sight and appeared just as the captain brought his fist down on the top of his head. 0%. And then he counterattacked. Fists and knees and feet and hands all beat into the young blonde as he struggled to move faster, his body seizing and spasming as he did so. Damn it. He knew what the older man wanted him to do, and he fell into old habits. He barely managed to raise his head when a fist slammed into his already broken nose. Then the boy crumpled into unconsciousness. Wash sighed. That was pathetic. Naruto had, obviously, not thought that keeping up with his physical endurance was a good idea, as evidenced by his bleeding unconscious F. Guess he'd have to remedy that. But first, Wash turned to the shocked teens and smirked before pointing at a frightened Kiba, who was scared beyond shitless. You're next. Rias was just shocked that a human managed to brutally beat a devil that badly. And then she whimpered as the man pointed at her. And you're after him. The idea that Issei Hyaudu had a sacred gear of considerable strength, well, considerable enough for Rias to send Naruto to watch over him, was somewhat laughable to the young blonde. Yes, he would freely admit it. Issei was a nice guy, and he did help him when he was having some minor troubles understanding the context of the homework during their English class, but he just didn't see the guy as anyone who would hold anything of true strength. Maybe that was it, he thought idly. Issei was so unassuming that he just had to have something to set himself apart from others. Other than his incredibly perverseness, that is. Either way, from what he observed from watching Issei go on a date with this Yuma girl, he felt he didn't really have much to look forward to when going on dates in the future. Seriously, was shopping, eating, and other things of that nature what people did? What was the point? Back home, especially in Tyrus, strong men bred with strong women. Yes, there was affection and kindness involved, but for the most part, it was a simple need to keep the gene pool afloat and survive. So many Tyrans and Indies had died in their stupid war that the two nations faced a serious threat of ending the war simply because they couldn't find anyone else to fight it. So, in short, here he was, sitting on a bench on the outskirts of the park, waiting for his shadow clones to dispel and send him the information on where they were going so he could get in position and continue watching. And he was bored, too. He had read all of the books he could on devil culture and history, so there wasn't really much he could do other than train, and he wasn't allowed to do that until Rias and Wash managed to come to an agreement on when and where to train. But it also had to do with his sudden missing of the presence of Koneko and Akano and Rias and Kiba, who had become something unfamiliar to him, it seemed. He didn't exactly understand what it was when Rias had told him he was going to be doing this alone, that feeling of something missing, so he hunted it to the back of his mind, where it would lay forgotten and ignored. His musings were cut short when a girl about his age sat down next to him and started to kick her feet. Glancing over, Naruto took in her appearance swiftly, silently happy to meet someone who also had naturally blonde hair. And judged her easily to be a fallen angel. Meh, if she didn't start something, he wouldn't. Hello. She turned to him with a cheery grin and waved lightly. Hey, my name's Midlet. Who are you? My name is Naruto. It is a pleasure to meet you. He intoned with a nod. May I ask why you have decided to sit next to me? A tilt of the head was what he got as she answered. Well, you looked all lonely over here all by your lonesome, so I figured I'd come sit with you. Oh. He looked lonely. He didn't feel lonely, but then again, he didn't exactly know what those kinds of feelings were in the first place, or at least wasn't adept at understanding them. And how do you figure I am lonely? The blonde girl just looked at him funny and replied, well, you looked like you were deep in thought, and then this sort of sad look came over it for a minute before it disappeared and you went back to looking like a robot. She paused and looked at him for a moment. You aren't one, right? It wasn't very well known, but Midlet had a phobia of robots. It was something she never really told anyone. Naruto blinked at Midlet for a moment before he replied, I am not a robot. He paused. Do I look like a robot? Midlet gave a hum of thought before she replied, well, you act like one and you have the voice of one, so. That he could explain easily. I was raised this way. As far as I know, I have always spoken this way. And I have always acted this way as well. Well, who raised you? He had an answer prepared for that thanks to Rias. I was raised in a temple from a young age. They thought that emotions would taint our souls and prevent us from achieving enlightenment. From what Kiba had said after hearing it, apparently Rias had stolen it from something called Star Wars, a popular movie franchise Kiba apparently had a great love for watching. Midori gave a short nod. That sounded about what she expected. Well, did they ask you if you wanted to join them or something? That gave him pause. He had never really asked to join the executioners. They had simply been there his entire life and he just sort of did what they said. But, did he choose it or did they choose it for him? I believe I chose it for myself. Well, what would have happened if you didn't join them? He would have been tied to a wooden pole in the yard of the camp, beaten in half dead, and made an example of to the other trainees, a clear example of what would happen if you didn't obey. And then they would have starved him to death. It would not have been good for my health to choose no as an answer. She nodded to herself before stating matter-of-factly, then you didn't choose it because you wanted it. What do you mean? She crossed her legs and looked at him for a long moment. Well, if you don't choose something because you want it, but because you have to or because someone says that it is the right choice, then are you really making the decision or are they? Freedom means choosing for yourself and slavery means having your choices made. Was he a slave then? Because, by what this girl, Midori, had told him, he was a slave and had always been one. From day one of what he could clearly remember, ever since leaving that small village in Tyros, all of his decisions had been made, from what Midlet had let him understand, for him by others. And even after the incident with the Forbidden Scroll, Rias had managed to get him under her service by making him choose between an uncertain future and a place with food, shelter, and relative safety. Even fools would know which one to choose between the two options, and no matter which angle he looked at it from, his decision was made for him by the redhead. Even after that, most of his decisions that didn't include immediate action were made by Rias as well. How did she know he wanted to even attend school? What if he had wanted to just study what he wished and train in the clubhouse? And she even chose his own last name. What if he had wanted to be Naruto Jabberwocky 3? It was really frightening and eye-opening just how little he really had control over his own life. At any moment, at least before this time, Rias could have ordered him to march to his own death and he would have done it without a second thought. A strange, sick feeling made its way into Naruto's chest. It hurt and tightened around his lungs and chest as his mind raced. Would she have done it? Could she have done it? A small part of him said that Rias wouldn't have, that she genuinely cared for him as a member of her peerage. But the cold, objective, and ruthless side of him said quite the contrary and made it loud and clear. Rias and the others, he thought with a start, could have killed him, ordered him to his death, or any number of other things and he would have done them. And suddenly, something snapped and the world froze, his vision changing and swirling as a deep, dark, and terrifying voice sounded in his head. Come. And Midlet just sat there, wondering if her distracting of Naruto would give Wolf and Reina time to kill that Issei kid. XXX line break at the same time XXX. Issei gasped as his date, Yuma, suddenly turned into a leather-wearing winged woman. He was terribly confused by what was happening and could only blink and back up in shock, stumbling a bit before he collided with something, or someone from the feel of it, and turned around in shock, only to gasp as a hand grabbed his throat in a painful grasp and lifted him off of the ground by his feet. He could feel his windpipe begin to be crushed under the grip before a backhand had him seeing stars. And then the man spoke softly, I wonder what makes you so special. What makes you so different from everyone else that you got a sacred gear? Issei could barely remain conscious and so couldn't answer him, but he didn't get the chance as the man dropped him and stepped back. Coughing, he barely heard the man say in an urgent tone, run. Run as fast as you can, boy. And he ran. He made it barely to the tree line when he suddenly felt searing pain in his knees and almost fell over, only to be held up by two spears of light going through his kneecaps into the ground. He was almost about to scream and yell for help when he was suddenly falling, only he couldn't feel the pain in his knees. He almost wished he didn't look up. His legs were still there, held up by the spears of light, only now the man from before was there, holding an oversized cleaver in one hand. Blood, his blood, splattered on it. And then Yuma was there, looking at him with a sadistic grin. He ran, but obviously didn't make it very far. Finished the man with a chuckle, eyeing Issei as a scientist with a rare dissection specimen. And he spoke to Issei again, this time mockingly. And in all honesty, I expected more from you. Oh well, we don't have to rush, and I hate sloppy gut work. And suddenly Issei was pinned to a tree by several light spears in his arms, barely able to breath let alone see. Did you know that in some parts execution is performed by cutting off just the first few layers of skin? The process is difficult and takes time to master and perform perfectly, as if you cut too deep you remove most of the nerve endings on the muscle. He demonstrated by swinging his cleaver and skinning Isai's forehead. It's called flaying. Another swing, this time his stomach lost a good portion of skin. And I consider myself a master. And then after what felt like hours Issei was left alone, the man and Yuma having left him half dead crew. Sapphire to the tree. A paper, the same one from the other day, fell out of his pocket and suddenly all he saw was flowing red hair. XXX line break back with Naruto XXX. Naruto had never really been good at meditating efficiently. Yes, he could access his mindscape and explore, but he never meditated well enough or as much as his fellow Jinchuriki did to commune with the chakra inside of them. Oh yes, he had listened to Yugito and Kushina when they were telling him all about the beasts their chakra looked like. Yugito got a massive blue fire Nekomata and Kushina got a giant bloody orange fox with 9 tails, and how they got a better grasp of it because they did so. He had never wanted to go to the innermost parts of his mind, so he was surprised when he wound up in front of a massive gate staring at the darkness behind it. That shouldn't be right, he thought idly. There should be something there. And then the darkness moved and he suddenly understood why the 10 tails was so much stronger than the other chakras. If size meant power, then this being was the absolute strongest. It was huge. It towered over him by several thousand meters. It was so long he could only barely see 10 massive tails waving about behind it. Massive, sharp teeth glinted as cruel, dark lips pulled back into a menacing grin as 2 eyes opened and focused on him immediately. The one was equally massive, the pupils comparable in size to the large vehicles he had seen the Japanese SDF drive. Tanks they were called. Deep red surrounded it and an abyss of black surrounded the iris. The other eye, however, made something inside of Naruto quiver in fear. Instead of a single orb, millions upon millions of the first eye filled the socket, each focused on him and piercing his soul an infinite time over. Massive pause. No, pause weren't that long. This monster had opposable thumbs, rested over one another as this beast lounged casually. And then it spoke in the deepest, darkest voice Naruto would probably ever hear. Come close, child. Let me get a good look at you. It purred in amusement, madness evident in its voice as Naruto stepped into the light of the cage. And suddenly he found a massive, mountain-like claw mere inches from his face. But he knew what it was, a testing strike. It was testing to see how brave he was. Good. Very good indeed. Tell me, child, what is it that you call yourself? Naruto fought to keep any traces of fear and awe out of his voice as he answered this being. My name is Naruto. It nodded its canine head and only then did Naruto notice the elongated ears that pointed back behind its skull. A fitting name, Maelstrom. Tell me, do you know why I brought you here? A shake of the head in the negative was its answer. I have brought you here for a single purpose, one that is important to your continued existence. And what is this purpose? Naruto asked carefully. The wolf, for that is what it really was, grinned so widely Naruto worried it might tear its face upper. Why? To ask you a few questions, of course. Question: did this monolithic being need to know something? Such as, why the 10 tails chakra asked, why do you continue to let yourself be subjugated by others, by weaker and lesser beings, by creatures whose very idea of controlling you is an affront to even me, the mighty 10 tails? Why do you continue to show mercy to such worthless beings? Naruto blinked and thought for a few moments, not prepared to be questioned on why he did as others asked. I do as they say because they are my superior. No one is superior to you, child. It roared, voice filled with rage as its one and many eyes focused intently on him, the glare they gave bringing him to his knees. You are above them. You are above and beyond the control, the worthless words of the executioner's oath, words that now cannot hold you back. You are above the commands of that little red-haired, __, who dares think she can command you, who had seen and done tenfold what she could ever dream of. You are above the foolish requests that those ignorant fools ask of you, who have no need of such obvious weaklings, so content in ye weakness they must ask another to solve their problems. So, I ask again, why? Naruto sat there, unblinking, as he thought over those words. Why did he obey the executioners? For power, please. He had power in spades, so much so he could obliterate the world several thousand times over. Why did he do as Rias commanded? Because she helped him. Please. He had been in far worse situations than that had been. He had literally spent most of his childhood, a childhood Rias had spent spoiled and happy and warm and loved, wondering if he was going to die in the next 5 minutes. Why did he help Kiba or Akano or Koneko or even that chubby boy in class? Because he wanted them to like him, befriend him, to not leave him alone in the world. Please, he had always been alone, would always be alone. If he wanted friends, he would make them fear him so that they would always be his friends. And who would stop him? He who held the might of the 10 tails, the chakra beast so powerful it devoured entire dimensions, whose power so great it needed to have a human bear it to even form physically in a mindscape. And then it hit him. He knew why. It was so obvious to him. It was the same reason, he realized, that girl, Midlet, had told him. Freedom meant choosing for yourself. Slavery meant having those choices made. He was afraid of the power freedom gave him. He was so used to slavery, so used to being told what to do. He had grown afraid of what would happen if he chose for himself. Afraid that if he chose, and chose wrong, those people he considered close to him would leave him all alone, making him want to grow stronger, only for his fear of choosing to do so, exacerbating the cycle so much he had simply locked away his emotions out of fear he would go mad. I get it, Naruto mumbled as he suddenly surged towards the cage in a sprint before flinging himself onto the lower chest of the great beast in T. He first open show of emotion since he had been 6 years old. Please. I don't ever want to be afraid anymore. Make me powerful. Make me strong. Make me skilled. Make it so I never have to be afraid again. He felt the form getting smaller faster, shrinking and changing form before he felt 2 arms wrap around him, gently holding him to a body unlike the form of the massive wolf. A surprisingly female voice spoke softly and kindly. Then all you need to do is listen while I make everything better. Naruto just looked up and grinned widely. Yes, Mama. XXX line break XXX. Rias frowned as she sat in the Orc Club room. She had been quite surprised at the state Issei had been left in. She had never known fallen angels to have been quite that sadistic, and she had immediately reincarnated him using 4 pawns, leaving her 3 after the use of her special mutation piece on Naruto, which got her thinking. She knew Naruto had been at the park watching while Issei had been basically tortured and beaten by the fallen angels, so why hadn't he done anything? Had he decided that discretion would have been a better idea than a direct confrontation? Either way, he was in for some major trouble when he got back. She could understand if he didn't want to make himself known if there were multiple fallen angels, but he should have been powerful enough to stay safe. She had used, she begrudgingly admitted, a special mutation piece she had swiped from her brother's peerage some time ago. It was actually kind of strange, that piece. She recalled, faintly, that her brother and father had discussed it to some length, or more accurately the sheer amount of power it took to even be used on an individual. They had said it used more power from the recipient than all of the 4 Satans to even be used. Although it did come at a cost, Ajuka Beelzebub had stated that the piece made whoever had its existing mental conditions even worse and could potentially lead to tears as well. She had watched Naruto after giving it to him, maybe not spending or interacting as much with him as she did the others, trying to see if it were true. She knew he suffered from severe insomnia, which became so much worse he couldn't even sleep, and that he was a sociopath incapable of connecting with others emotionally, which he seemed to do even less of. Now that she thought about it, maybe she should have a talk with Naruto and make sure that he was okay. She hadn't exactly been paying him much attention, and in hindsight it was unfair to him. She hoped he wouldn't be upset. Who was she kidding? Naruto probably didn't care, although it was hard to shake the thought that Naruto would be okay after a talk with her. Everything should be okay in the end, right? Right. Wash sighed lightly as he stared up into the early evening sky, a cigarette hanging out of the corner of his mouth as he gazed at the myriad of colors, deep in thought. Despite his relative youth, Wash in all actuality felt quite old. He was, chronologically, only in the beginning of his life, and he already felt the same old creaks and aches and tiredness that he vaguely remembered the elderly always complained about. He took a deep drag and let out the smoke after letting it set in his lungs, getting the full flavor and relax it. Ion from the little white stick. It was honestly ridiculous that he felt this way. He was young and spry, and he was more than capable of combating any opponent who came at him, within reason. He was an SSS class executioner for a reason, after all. But, right at that moment, he couldn't find the strength to even move after a long afternoon of thinking about his current charge, Naruto. The boy was a strange case, even by the standards of the executioners. Even if it was a little bit, whether anger or hatred or love or happiness, a small bit of emotion lived within them. It fueled their need to be stronger and better and faster. It was an intense love of the executioners themselves that made him push himself, despite not having access to chakra the SA. Way Naruto did, to become the best. But Naruto didn't have any of those. At least, no immediate access to those emotions. Not even the most staunch of executioners had their emotions that badly stunted, to the point that they were made into sociopaths incapable of connecting emotions to people or objects. But Naruto did. It was frightening when he really thought about it, because that way he wouldn't understand morality, of what right and wrong really were, and why they stopped criminals from doing the wrong thing. All it was a simple job to him. There was no joy or dislike he felt for it. There was no care if he were to get the wrong evidence and accuse the wrong person. It was as if he had been programmed to simply follow any order given by his apparent superior. It sounded like something that the old bastard would have done if he weren't already ahead on a pike at the executioner's main facility. From what Wash had read, Jinchuriki like Naruto had to have some kind of emotion to channel their abilities fully through. That he didn't kind of explained why Naruto wasn't as strong, truly, as a tried and true SS class. Hell, Wash thought in amusement, the only reason he really has that classification is because he was a Jinchuriki and it was expected for him to be that strong. In all honesty, Naruto was just a bit above a mid-A rank. It certainly explained why he got his handed to him the other night, at least. In all the years that Wash had watched and observed the boy, he had never really seen any kind of fire in him. It was as if he just trained for the sake of power, nothing more. Wash's thoughts were stopped when he felt a surge of familiar energy suddenly appearing out of nowhere, causing everyone who wasn't a supernaturally powered person to collapse, and then he was gone, heading off to the park where he NSED it was coming from. XXX line break XXX. Midori trembled from where she sat, trying to suck in a breath as the power emanating from her fellow blonde washed over her. She had never felt anything like this before. She had been near Azazel, the strongest fallen angel, and even he didn't exude this much pure power as this kid. She couldn't even move, and then he started to change. The energy began to recede, showing that it had covered every portion of his skin in a luminescent light blue energy. It formed a darker blue-colored coat with a black-colored bodysuit underneath that covered his torso, reached down his arms to his knuckles, and down his legs, stopping just above his now bare feet. He had a lighter blue-colored circle on his stomach and maggot armor of the same color around his collar. 6 bars of pure black appeared over his whisker scars and 2 horns of hair stuck up from his forehead. On the back of his coat and on the strip of cloth he used as an eye patch he wore was glowing the same light blue. A strange symbol that consisted of 3 concentric rings filled with 3 maggot armor each. Floating behind him in a circle were 10 pitch black orbs that filled her with dread as she looked at them. And then his eye opened, revealing that his pupil had changed to a strange cross shape with the pupil being black, the iris blood red, and the white black as well. She had no idea that just talking to him would make him suddenly power up and nearly blow her back from the sheer power he was exuding. He spoke after a few moments of stretching his arms and fingers, looking at her in the eyes he did. His voice having deepened and changed as if he wasn't the only one speaking to her. Thanks for the talk and I wish we could continue it, but right now I need to have a discussion with a certain girl. If you would excuse me. He blurred out of existence, just a blue streak really, before he was suddenly there in front of her still seated form, lifting her hand and kissing the knuckles on it. Sort of like he had seen statesmen do to ladies back in the elemental nations, all before he blurred away again. A streak of blue light zipping through alleys and streets. And all the while Mytel just sat there with a large blush, not expecting any of what just happened. And she suddenly wanted to see that weird kid again. XXX line break XXX. Wash groaned as he landed on a rooftop, having just finished jumping halfway across town to the park before the massive energy moved back to the school he had just left. Taking just a moment to catch his breath, he looked out into the street and cursed. All of the normal humans were unconscious from the initial burst of power. Obviously some small basic and primal part of them just deciding that whoever was that powerful, it would be best to just conk out before it shows them as targets. Sighing and cursing Naruto because he had to have had something to do with this, he just knew it. He turned and began to leap back the way he came, silently pondering why it felt like he was struggling to lift off the ground each leap. XXX line break XXX. Naruto zipped and ran through Kuo, racing towards the Orc clubhouse, where he knew Rias was, with a frown on his face, mind flashing back to his conversation in his mindscape. XXX flashback mindscape before power-up XXX. Naruto looked at the 10 tails with a confused look, wondering now that he had calmed down, where the massive wolf had gone, and why there was this woman in its place. She was a beautiful woman with delicate facial features and pale skin, having long sweeping hair that trailed behind her from where she sat next to him. She wore a long white kimono that covered her hands and feet, and her eyes had changed as well. No longer were they the one and the many, but now gentle orbs that had no definite pupil, but rather defined irises that were completely blank. On her forehead were 2 large horns that resembled the same ears the massive wolf had. And a small part of Naruto noted she had rather generously large, barely hidden by her kimono top. And that made him halt his thoughts for a moment. Where had that come from? For that matter, why did he feel confused? Was that the right word for it? But he also felt content, whole, as if something important was back in place. I feel strange, like something is back where it should be. He murmured in awe as he looked at his hands in wonder. These emotions were wonderful. He could feel them fill him up and make him understand more. He paused and looked at the 10 tails for a moment, wondering just who she was. You never gave me your name, you know. She raised a delicate eyebrow, looking at him in amusement. Oh, he nodded, his blonde hair shaking as he did. Yes, Rias says that it is impolite to not introduce yourself, and that I should do it every time I meet someone. There is merit to that. Very well, you may call me Kaguya. The now named Kaguya said with a smile on her red lips. Now, tell me, what do you think of this? Rias and her peerage. Naruto frowned at that. Truth be told, he didn't know what to think. After his actually rather short conversation with Midlet, he had been left with his world rocked and destroyed by the revelation he was little more than a slave. And that Rias had used his, now that he thought about it, rather obvious naivete about choosing for himself to get him to join her peerage. To be honest, I don't really know. Kaguya gave a nod as she gestured at him. It is as that girl, Midlet I believe, said, a man chooses, a slave obeys. If you had the choice now, would you stay with her? It was an honest question, and one that Naruto didn't exactly have an answer for. He had only just gained access to emotions he didn't even know exist. But it was a question he couldn't put off. Would he have stayed with Rias? A more sentimental part of him said yes, he would have joined if she asked. He would have joined and worked alongside them, become stronger with them. But the more cynical and jaded side said that he shouldn't. That she only wanted him for his strength and nothing more. That she didn't particularly care for him as a person. After all, she had left him to be educated by Akeno while she went off and did whatever she did, didn't she? If she had truly cared, she would have explained and taught him these things herself. I think I need to speak with her. To talk with her about a lot of things. Naruto said with determination. And then, depending on what she tells me, I can give you an answer, Kaguya. She gave a nod and another smile at that. I understand. And now, I must ask, what are you afraid of the most? Naruto frowned and thought for a moment. What was he afraid of? I suppose I am afraid of becoming so powerful no one will want to be around me. Kaguya looked at him for a moment at that. Oh. How so? I would be a constant reminder of what they're not. Of how far the gap between us would be. That because of this, I would alienate myself from them. He mused aloud. I was afraid of being a king whose people feared him and despised him. But with that power, with my power, you never have to be afraid of that again. Kaguya said as he cupped his scarred face, gently rubbing his cheek with her thumb. With my power, any who speak ill of you, any who fear you, any who ignore you, will learn what it means to make an enemy of the king. With your power, Naruto mumbled. Kaguya smiled as he kept stroking his cheek, watching as he began to see what she meant. Yes, with my power, you never have to fear again. She leant in closer, then to see better into his eyes. Do you want it? My power. The power to claim the throne as yours. Yes. Naruto mumbled. Yes. 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 Then so be it. Kaguya leaned forward even more and kissed the tip of Naruto's nose in a motherly fashion, a gentle look in her eyes as she brought the boy closer to her. I shall give back what you lost. I shall remove the barrier placed upon those feelings, and I will give you the strength to endure all things. Naruto looked at Kaguya for a moment, the blush still on his face from the kiss, and asked, You will give back my emotions. How? What will it do? You will feel everything a normal boy feels. Joy, sorrow, love, hate, fear, courage. It will be as if you had never lost them in the first place. Now, I do believe that there is a certain girl that you need answers from, correct? He nodded. Good. Now, go. In the time it takes for you to reach her, all of your emotions will be back. It will be a struggle to understand them, but you will grow stronger for it. Now, go and get the answers you seek. XXX flashback and XXX. He blushed at the memory of the kiss on his nose before he shook his head and landed in front of the rusted building, still covered in what he had dubbed the Ten Tails chakra cloak. He frowned at the building, wondering if what he was doing was a good idea, before squashing the thought and moving forward. He looked around himself as he ran, oddly noting that things seemed to be moving slower, much slower than normally. Food for thought after all this was said and done. He wanted answers, and if Rias didn't give him any, well, it wouldn't be pretty, he mused. XXX line break XXX. They had never felt anything this powerful before. Not even Rias, who had lived with her brother her entire life, had felt anything this enormous before. It took all of her willpower not to simply collapse under the weight of it. The others weren't faring any better. Akano had essentially become glued to her seat and couldn't move, no matter how much she tried and strained to do so. Kiba had simply passed out, falling unconscious from the primal fear his body was feeling from the energy in the air. But, by far, Koneko had it the worst. She had simply shut down and was sitting on the couch, frozen, staring into space with wide hazel eyes as her fight or flight instincts screamed at her to run like a __, while her Nekomata pride, long since ignored, screamed at her to find the source of this powerful chakra and make it hers. Issei was still blissfully unconscious from earlier run-in with Wolf and Rainier. They grew tensed, well, the ones who could, as they felt the enormous aura approaching them at a fast pace. And from the feeling of the maelstrom of power, it was pretty upset. But, little did any of them know that this show of strength attracted the attention of quite a few powerful individuals. XXX line break XXX. In his dark office, the shadowed man sat and blinked curiously at the crushing pressure he felt, not at all bothered by it, even as his associates all began to drop to their knees. XXX line break XXX. In a place full of swirling and spinning colors, a massive red dragon blinked as it felt a power al. Most equal to 0.001% of his full might at the edge of his senses. Ha! Cool. XXX line break XXX. A small girl with black hair blinked stoically as she registered this power before thinking of ways to recruit this being to her Chaos Brigade. All the while, her subordinates talked amongst each other about what could make a power equal to some of their middle rank members. XXX line break XXX. In the underworld, the four Satans all stopped momentarily in their tasks to register this new power before they all decided that maybe they should send someone to investigate, and, in a certain redhead's instance, inform Rias of the moving of her wedding to sooner rather than later. Naruto was entirely prepared to become a stray devil if the coming confrontation went south. It may have been a series of rash and confusing instances that caused him to have his current mindset, but that was okay. It really was. Naruto had been hunted before, probably would in the future, and he survived. With his newfound power, he could very well obliterate anyone who came his way. He sincerely hoped it didn't come to that, though. After an entire life up until a few weeks ago expecting to die and having to live in constant fear, Naruto finally had a chance to choose between living in fear of growing strong and shedding his bonds and being strong and having this thing called family. He reined in his newfound power and opened the door. the chakra covering him illuminating the room and casting shadows everywhere as the occupants looked to him in shock. Kaneko snapped out of her daze and fled to the other side of the room as Naruto advanced on Rias, his eyes filled with held-back rage. When he stopped right in front of Rias, who looked shocked to see him, he spoke. I believe we need to have a conversation, Rias. One that cannot be put off any further. Rias just nodded dumbly and sat down, gesturing for Naruto to sit on the opposite couch, which he declined, instead sitting on one of the black spheres circling his back that had enlarged to allow him to sit upon it. Very well, Naruto. But first, may I ask what all of this is? She was handling this situation very well, he thought wryly. This is merely what happens when my true power becomes too much for my body to contain. It is of little concern of yours for right now. The red-haired girl just nodded and began. So, Naruto, what is it you wish to speak about? No point in beating around the bush. Tell me, what was the reason you let me join your peerage? Why did you let me, an obvious stranger, join into your family? Because you needed a place to Santa. Enough with that, Rias. We both know that wasn't it. Now, Naruto narrowed his cross-shaped eye at her, not even caring that he had interrupted her in the slightest. Tell me exactly why you let me join. And don't you dare, me about being a good person and taking in a stray. Ah. Naruto cursed. He said a swear word. The one person who probably didn't even know what cursing was just did. What was going on? Naruto, what brought this on? Why do you want to know the exact reason for me asking you to join? Naruto stared at her for a moment before he replied. It was recently brought to my attention that I haven't been really choosing my own path myself. Instead, it seems that people who think that they're above me choose for me. So, I will ask one more time. Why did you add me to your peerage? Rias just nodded and thought over what to say, seeing as he wouldn't be letting it go anytime soon. She did ideally wonder just who the person who told him this was and had half a mind to ask. Before I explain why, do you know how many devils there are left in the underworld, Naruto? That was a left-field question if there ever was one, but he still answered her, if only to get on with the convey. Rsation. After the Great War, many devil families had been decimated or wiped entirely out. Because of this, the Satan Ajuka Beelzebub created the evil peace system to replenish the number of devils. What does that have to do with what I asked? Naruto, there were several reasons I wanted you to join my peerage. But first and foremost was because you had obvious strength and power, and I made a split-second decision. The second was because we, and by that I mean devils as a whole, need more powerful and strong members in order to ensure those desirable traits had the chance to be passed down to new devils. Devils, especially pure-blooded ones, have a difficult time breeding. The more there are, the better chances of our race's survival. The third reason was because you, at that time, were very much disoriented and confused, even if you didn't show it. If I had let you go, you would eventually have been found by some other group or faction who would not have asked questions first before trying to hunt and kill you. The fourth and final reason is personal, but because I can see you need some confirmation, I'll tell you. I am currently engaged to a man named Rias Gremory. How does who you marry affect your decision in having me join, Rias? Naruto asked, calming slightly after hearing her reasons. They were logical, and the third one had made him forgive her, if only barely. Rias took a shuddering breath as she spoke, disgust in her tone. Rias Gremory is the single most disgusting man in the entire universe. He is a worthless deviant who only wants me because of my looks, and has made it clear he would use me to get to Akeno and Koneko. It took everything in Naruto's power not to obliterate the room at that. Akeno was like the older sister he probably didn't have, and Koneko was about the closest thing he had to a best friend, even if they only ate lunch together. She continued, heedless of his anger, although it did concern her. It is a stipulation my older brother added to the marriage contract that if he couldn't defeat me in a racing game, then the marriage would be called off. It was why I had thought I hit the jackpot with you. With you in my peerage, then the chances of me winning went up exponentially. Silence pervaded the room as Naruto absorbed what she said. She was basically telling him that the only reason she manipulated him, if ever so shortly, into joining her peerage. If I asked you to, in complete honesty, would you ever willingly abandon me, even if I was far stronger than you. Rias laughed gently at that. What was he so afraid of? That he would become so strong that she wouldn't want him. That by being more powerful, she would resent him for it. It was almost laughable, but she could see it in his eyes, which seemed much warmer than before, that he was genuinely frightened by the thought of it. He was scared of being so powerful he would be all alone at the top of the food chain. Naruto, I promise you here and now that no matter how much stronger, faster, and more powerful you become, I and my peerage will never, ever abandon you. Naruto stared in silence as he looked at her face for any kind of lies or deceit. And when he didn't find any, he smiled ever so slightly and shut off his cloak. Very well then. He wasn't entirely satisfied with her answer, and his fear was still firmly there, but for now, he could deal with it and get on with life. Even if putting it off only meant waiting until after he absolutely wrecked Riza for next in a rating game. And suddenly, the captain burst through the window with a majestic cry, nailing Kiba in the head with a flying kick, sending the poor young knight into the wall while Wash fell. L into a roll and stood in a combat pose. What the is going on? XXX line break XXX. Great Red had been alive for a very, very long time. So long in fact, he had amassed a massive amount of power. A ridiculous amount. So much so that it was beyond comprehending. So when he felt that spike of power in the world of humans, he had gotten curious. To have it even reach 0.001% was amazing in itself, because 0.001% of his power was beyond anything that a normal being should be capable of. He couldn't think of one devil, angel, fallen angel, yokai, or any other being he could recall existing capable of putting off that much power, except for one. And if she was back, then he was going to have so much fun. Their last fight had been one he could truly enjoy, one he still remembered every detail of. It had tested him unlike any other battle he had ever been in had before, one that had forced him to travel to different universes entirely to find new battlegrounds. Oh. He so hoped she was back. But if she was, then why was her power so muted? Contained. What had happened to cause her to feel that way? Whatever it was, he was going to find out. Maybe after a short several-month nap, but he would still find out. XXX line break XXX. A few hundred miles out of Kuo, a small bus was driving down the road. What was so abnormal about this bus was the fact that instead of the crowded and dirty interior that most people had come to expect from such transportation, this one was actually fairly clean and only had one passenger. That passenger was a gentle-looking blonde girl with green eyes wearing a conservative nun outfit and brown boots. She was reading a worn and well-used Bible, smiling and humming happily to herself as she did. In just a few more days, she would be able to atone for her sin of being born. XXX line break XXX. Wolf smirked as he prowled the halls of the abandoned church he currently called home. Everything was coming together perfectly in regards to his plans. He was disappointed, though. He expected the boy, Issei he believed his name was, to put up some kind of fight. But he didn't. He didn't fight or snarl or even insult him like that other boy who he met all those years ago did. Now there was someone he eagerly awaited seeing again. Stopping outside of a particular door, he cracked his neck and opened it, silently wondering just why anyone needed that much pink on their walls. Seriously, it was like Barbie had thrown up all over the walls and doors of the room. Midlet looked up at him and he smirked at her wide and fearful look. He hadn't seen how she was so disgusted by him and his actions. Besides, she was one of those girls who was too proud and above such things as petty lust. Oh. How he was going to enjoy breaking her in. He so enjoyed the look of disgust on her face as he advanced, and he grinned widely as she backpedaled as fast as she could. Just as he was about to grab her, though, she suddenly lashed out and nailed him in the man's weak spot. He sunk to his knees with tears of anger and humiliation in his eyes as she ran from the room, stopping only to grab a backpack she had, probably prearranged to use in case she needed to make a hasty evacuation and retreat. As he controlled his breathing and felt the pain ebb away, he snarled in hatred. When he got his hands on her, she would beg him for the mercy of a good after he had finished explaining to Wash that there was no cataclysmic event taking place, and that yes, he did in fact have better access to his emotions now, and yes, he did have a sense of humor. Naruto had volunteered to investigate just what had happened to Issei at the park as fallen angels weren't normally that brutally violent and sadistic. So, after a night's rest, which mostly involved Naruto meditating and speaking with Kaguya, Wash had also volunteered to go with the blonde if only because he was worried Naruto might have another explosive power episode. Naruto had just shrugged and left with the man, leaving the original peerage members alone. Akano looked at Rias with a rare serious look on her face. What had happened with Naruto should not have even been an option to happen. The fact it did meant that something major changed in Naruto. I told you, Rias, you need to interact with him more. The fact that he even questioned your motives for adding him to the peerage is a testament to that fact. I know, Akano, I know. Rias sighed as she sat back, tension visibly leaving her body. She was very lucky that Naruto accepted her reasons and that he was willing to give her a second chance, and even luckier that Naruto apparently cared a lot about his fellow peerage members. It's just I got so distracted with that coming up soon that he sort of fell through the cracks. We're lucky Sona didn't get to him, or she would probably be grooming him to be her future husband. Akano said, her usual teasing back in her voice, and with this rather large show of his new power, Shell. L probably tried to talk him into requesting a trade to her peerage anyways. Rias grimaced at that. Sona most likely would do that. Naruto was, in devil terms at least, perfect husband material. With his reawakened emotions, his strength, and his future good looks, she would probably have to beat off other female devils from kidnapping him. Damn it, now she had a new worry. Oh well, as soon as she could, she would have Naruto take the high-class devil examination, completely skipping the mid-class. Hey, having a Mao as a brother had its perks, you know. Issei then groaned as he began to wake up, making Rias sigh. No rest for the wicked, she supposed. XXX line break XXX. Naruto frowned as he followed Issei's trail into the woods of the park. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. This was premeditated, planned and executed perfectly. The problem was, the wounds on Issei weren't concordant with what Rias had said fallen angels were capable of. And unless this particular one suddenly decided to use a cutting or hacking weapon, then there had to be two attackers. His concern was well-founded, though, as he followed the footprints of two individuals to what he mentally called Issei's death tree. The size of the first matched what he knew to be the fallen angel. She was female from the lack of depth to the print. The size of the second was what was strange. It was male, as could be told from the depth of the footprint, but it was obvious that he was carrying something fairly heavy, and judging from the two burnt holes in the ground and the direction of the cut, he had been the one to cut off Issei's legs. So, there were two. Wash walked over then and examined the scene with a keener eye than his younger counterpart. Over by the tree, do you see it? Naruto nodded in affirmation and approached, squatting so he could examine it closer. It was a small, as in less than 1 inch chipped piece of metal, bright and shiny with care. Grabbing it, Naruto held it up to his face and blinked as he felt it synchronize with his chakra. The small piece of metal humming with life at the touch. Chakra metal. Blinking, Wash squatted as well to get a better look at the metal. Yes, and a very expensive, very high quality brand of it as well. Handing it to Wash, Naruto continued his examination before he closed his eyes and opened his sixth sense of chakra sensing. He almost screamed when he felt the familiar chakra of one of the few people he hated that was still alive, Valf van Brackenhorn. Snarling, he whirled on the surprised captain and practically spat the words, "Valf was here." Narrowing his eyes, Wash said, "Valf, are you sure? I could never, will never forget that thing's chakra signature." The young blonde snarled with hate hand over his eye cloth. "If he is here, we need to tell Rias immediately." They stopped as they heard the sound of flapping wings, each turning to look at one another before turning back to the fountain. Naruto spoke first, "Go and tell Rias and the others. I'm going to check that out." XXX line break XXX. Mittled felt a sense of relief wash over her as she sat down in the park by the fountain where Rainier and Valf had tortured and killed the human guy. She could only rest for a few moments, though. She knew that by now the others must have heard about her defection and were no doubt hoping to stop her from reaching Azazel and the Gregory to report what they were doing and what they were going to do. Sighing, she sat down and began to think, trying in vain to hold tears back. Why oh why did she have to listen to Rainier and her plans of grandeur? She had been foolish then, she saw that now. She had been safe in the Gregory. No one had bothered her. She got food and a place to stay and didn't have to worry about being killed by any number of things in the world. Yes, she hadn't really had the chance to grow stronger, and yes, it wasn't perfect, but she was safe. No faction wanted to be the ones who destroyed the fragile truce all three factions had going on now. By accident, her thoughts turned to the strange guy from yesterday, Naruto, and his oh-so-sudden surge that had left her breathless. Man, if she had him here, she wouldn't have to worry about Wolf finding and, shudder, defiling her. And with that thought, she remembered the kiss on her hand he had given her with a blush. Oh. All last night she had dreams about it. Although her dreams weren't just him giving her a kiss on the knuckles. She blushed harder at the thought. What? She was a fallen angel. She wasn't some goody two-shoes. Midlet, a familiar voice asked, making said girl turn her head to it. And to her shock and disbelief was the object of her thoughts standing right there in a blue jacket, black shirt, gray pants, and blue shoes, confusion on his face at seeing her. Naruto, what are you doing here? She questioned. She hadn't expected to see him again. Although if he did that cool glowy body thing, she wouldn't complain. He replied shortly, I was going for a walk when I saw you. Why do you have a backpack? Are you going somewhere? Nodding, Midlet shouldered her vintage Hello Kitty backpack. You could say I ran away from home. Again, Naruto questioned. Well, you see, there's these guys living in my home who aren't exactly good people. And I may have reacted violently to one of them trying to do something very bad to me. So now, I can't go home. She explained as best she could. Do you need a place to stay? Or, that was so sweet of him, she thought with a gush and then turned worried after remembering her current problem. Maybe, you see, they may be well, Medelt. Seems we've just found you. A male voice said as two pairs of flapping wings sounded in the area. Following me, she finished weakly with a chuckle as two figures landed on the ground. The first was a middle-aged looking man who had short dark hair and dark blue eyes, wearing a trench coat and fedora with an ascot. He had a violent look about him as he landed, a bright spear made of light in his hand. The second was a woman with long navy blue hair and brown eyes. She was wearing a trench coat-like top with a wide collar, a matching mini-skirt, and black heels. She appeared hesitant and nervous as she landed, no spear in sight. Naruto looked at them for a second, suddenly feeling like he needed to comment. Friends of yours. One of them is, Medelt said with a look towards the woman. The man laughed as if she had just told the greatest of jokes, smirking after he subsided. Oh. How that hurts, Medelt. I thought we were friends. We were, and then you decided to follow Reiner and join those psychopaths. The blonde girl proclaimed angrily at the man. The man just shook his head and laughed again. You know, I was going to let you live, if only so that I can get a taste after Lord Wolf was done with you. But now I think I'm going to kill you and your corpse. He threw the spear in his hand fast, expecting it to impale her, ignoring the other blonde standing there. In a normal world, where Medelt hadn't managed to help Naruto jumpstart his emotions, she would have been impaled and had her corpse desecrated. But in this one, Naruto appeared in front of her and caught the spear, barely even noticing or caring at the burns that appeared from touching the light. Twirling it in his hands, Naruto his neck and grinned, the feeling of the unused muscle strange. Now, it's not nice to throw weapons at a girl, you know. The man snarled at Naruto, just now acknowledging his presence. And who the hell are you? Naruto tilted his head and thought it over for a bit. My name doesn't matter right now, but if you need to, you may refer to me as one of two different things. You can call me either your executioner or the devil kid. Midlet looked at him in surprise at that. He was a devil. He didn't look like what she thought devils did. But, now that she actually focused on it, she could sense some devil magic underneath that strange energy he had surrounding and in him. It still wouldn't stop her from riding him like a horse if she got the chance to, though. The man sneered at Naruto. And you can call me Donosik. In response, the now named Donosik barely dodged his own spear, thrown many times faster than he had thrown it, which was aimed at his head. Snapping his head towards Naruto, he watched as the normally stoic and emotionless boy gave a smirk. I think I'll call you Prey, from now on, K. Meanwhile, while Naruto and Donosik, aka Prey, were just starting their battle, Midlet was speaking with Kalawana. Please, just leave them. Don't you get it? All they're going to do is ruin us. The blonde, pig-tailed girl pleaded. Out of all the others at the church, Kalawana was the only one she could actually call a friend. The navy-haired girl looked at Mittled for a long moment. And where would we go? Huh? Where could we, fallen angels, go? Mittled paused and glanced at Naruto, an idea in her mind already. Naruto offered me a place to stay earlier. Maybe he can do it for the both of us. Kalawana gave her a look and shook her head before the two turned and watched Naruto and Donosuke fight. Quote, maybe. Back with Naruto's fight, said blonde was currently remembering the first lesson he had ever been taught by Wash way back when. He had just been chosen by the elder man to act as his mentor. It was a lesson that let him practically dominate the fight up to this point. How to dodge. He had taken many shots to the face when he was younger to learn this skill. And since then, he had taken to keeping it up and refined it even more, making it better. And he had to dodge this guy a lot, especially when he started to make multiple spears of light and send them at him. Naruto retaliated, though, thanks to having been given access to Kaguya's chakra in its entire form, he could refill his chakra instantly, removing his poor control from the equation. As such, he had begun to focus chakra into his hand and began to push it onto the tip of his index finger, his hand. Shaped like a gun, firing off bullets of pure chakra that either clashed with the spears or hit Donosuke in non-vital areas. As the battle raged on, he had begun to notice the pattern that the fallen angel used to attack. Before each volley of multiple spears, the man would send a larger spear at him, giving him time to build up the energy to send out the spears. He could capitalize on that, he thought, as he sent one more chakra bullet at the man. The two stopped moving suddenly, with Donosuke gasping for breath while Naruto looked as fresh as a daisy, even having the time to give a slightly arrogant smirk at the fallen angel. Is that all you got? Pray. How disappointing. And it was. With Naruto now unafraid of actually showing power, he wasn't all that worried. It was strange to him how he was enjoying fighting this man so much. How he wanted to drag it out even more. But he supposed he had better just end him and try, and then figure out what to tell Rias when she asked him why he had not just one, but two fallen angel girls with him. Donosuke, however, was pissed beyond belief as he snarled angrily. Disappointing. I'll give you disappointing. He began to focus more of his power into this spear, making it grow larger and larger until it was the size of an industrial lamp post. Naruto just raised a brow. And how is your overcompensating going to save you? Just die, devil trash. The other man roared as he threw with all of his might at the blonde. The explosion that occurred afterwards was not, in Naruto's words, an expression of the racial violence that Latin Americans face every day in their world. Which got him an up-head slap by Akeno, Rias, Koneko, and Mittled surprisingly, who all used the phrase, "It was just an explosion," to describe it. When the dust settled, Naruto wasn't there and Donosuke was grinning smugly in victory. Mittled just let her eyes widen at the sudden disappearance of her fellow blonde, feeling something lurch in her chest at the sight of the crater, while Carla Warner closed her eyes with a sigh. And then he was there, behind Donosuke without the same smile or smirk he had on his face while fighting. Instead, he had the same emotionless eyes he had before he met Kaguya in his head. Now, that wasn't very nice. His voice distorted as his bandage-covered arm had dark shadows creeping through the cracks, covering his arm in an inky darkness that very much frightened the shocked Donosuke. It isn't nice, you know, to try and kill someone with an explosion. In fact, it downright pisses me off. If Mittled had to describe that voice, it would be that it was cold, with a patient undertone that surprised her, making her shiver with something she couldn't immediately place, while Carla Warner had wide eyes at the sight of his arm. Donosuke saw his death then. The feeling of that arm. It was unnatural. It was as if everything that touched that hellish darkness died. That there was no hope. He just wanted to give up and die then and there. Then suddenly he ran, unminding that he had turned his back on his opponent, just caring if he managed to escape. He had to get away. To escape. Whatever that darkness was, it was bad news for him. He flapped his wings harder and harder, trying to get as much distance from that horrid darkness as possible. And suddenly, he was falling. He felt an agonizing amount of pain in his back, in his wings, as he fell. And when he hit the ground, he knew why. Whatever that darkness was, it devoured whatever it touched. Where his once glorious black wings were, was now little more than skeletal bone, which quickly began to turn to dust in the wind. What? Do you like it? Pray? Naruto asked, his eye having changed to that of a dark cross on a blood-red circular field, surrounded by nothing but darkness. The look of cold, detached interest made Don Asik whimper in fear, the front of his pants gaining a dark stain as he clenched his eyes. This is my Rispera, and it is very special. The black and purple, for there was a purple tint to it, miasma began to coagulate around his arm, covering it completely. Do you want to know why? A whimper. Rispera is special because it can kill anything, and I mean anything. You see, what it does is age and rot things so rapidly that, normally, the target barely has time to react before he dies. I can control the speed, though, and once it touches even your clothing, a quiet whisper, once it touches anything connected to you, it won't stop until nothing is left. It will rot and rot and rot it until all traces, even your soul, is erased. And want to know the best part? Louder. A plea. No matter how far you go, no matter how fast you are, no matter how powerful or strong you are, yelling, there is no escape. Don Asik screamed, begged, pleaded to the sky as the Resper engulfed him. Please God, save me. And then he knew and was no more. Naruto held his black and purple covered head up to his face and looked at it curiously, his one eye studying the black and purple covered limb. He turned to the two fallen angel girls, focusing on the shocked form of Midlet, and smirked before saying a simple phrase. Well now, I do think I asked you, do you need a place to stay? Sometimes Rias Gremory and ruthlessly despised the day she ever got her evil pieces. Yes, they had let her meet some of her closest and most dear friends, but those same friends also caused her almost never-ending headaches. If it wasn't Akino's sadist masochist personality, Kiba's obsession with getting revenge, Koneko and her insecurities, it was her newest pieces, Naruto and Issei. Issei was at least easier to deal with. He had taken to now being a devil far faster and easier than she had expected. Sure, he was still mostly ignorant about how their society worked and about how he was now expected to train and become more powerful, but he at least tried to roll with it after some persuasion. Naruto, on the other hand, it seemed to her, now lived for the singular purpose of giving her the worst migraines, at least ever since he had had his bottled-up emotions forced into consciousness. Case in point, the two female fallen angels that flanked him on either side, with both occasionally King at Naruto's bandaged right arm with something akin to fear, and Naruto having a perfect poker face on. So, Rias asked while rubbing her temples, idly thinking she would have to get Grafia a really nice fruit basket as an apology if this is what she had to deal with in regards to her and her brother all the time. You went to the park with Washed investigate, finding that there was more than just one perpetrator. Yes, and finding that out, you heard the sound of Midna, right? Escaping, deserting the fallen angels in the area. Sounds about right. And after a very short conversation where you offered her a place to stay. 'Cause I'm apparently supposed to be a good person. You were found by two other fallen angels, one of which joined Midna in deserting. The more the merrier, I say. While the other attempted to kill you, leading to a battle. Which I won, where you used an ability called Respire to rot an angel, the fallen angel away. Did you expect me to let him stab me? And then proceeded to get food and return here? Well, to be honest, getting the food wasn't necessarily part of the plan. I was hungry and Midna and Carla Warner kind of just went along with it. Naruto said with a shrug. What? He was hungry and wanted food. Fighting and using energy rapidly does that to a person. And the nonchalant and cavalier way he said all of that just served to give Rias another headache. Damn it. Why couldn't Naruto have just stayed the same emotionless kid who just sat quietly and never did a nithing? Oh. Right. He somehow managed to force all of the emotions he had pushed down to resurface in one go and was still adjusting to the new sensations. And he had still not told anyone just what had gone down in his head to allow him access to said emotions, she thought with a mental frown. She needed to get that story soon. Oh. Naruto, what am I going to do with you? Rias sighed as she shook her head. Naruto quirked his lips up into a small smile. Let me do whatever I want, within reason. Shaking her head, Rias set her eyes on the two girls that had followed Naruto with a frown. She didn't necessarily hate fallen angels, but growing up as a devil had definitely made her very, very biased against them. And the way that the younger blonde of the two kept shooting glances and blushing slightly at Naruto made her eyes narrow even more. Now, would you two please help me understand just what is going on? Why was Issei attacked? On the other side of the room, Issei sat forward and listened intently. While it may have come as a shock to most of the people in the school, Issei wasn't a completely hopeless pervert. Don't get him wrong. He still had a massive obsession with, but he could control it when the need arrived, and right now he was dying to know why he was targeted. Carla Warner answered Rias as honestly as she could. We don't know most of the finer details of the plan, but what we do know is that Rainier, our leader, has made some pretty powerful allies to help her collect sacred gears. The brown-haired kid has one, although I'm not entirely sure which one it is, and I also know that another user is coming into the city sometime soon. I do know that whatever they have planned, it isn't going to be pretty. Rias nodded and turned to Wash, who was staring at the chip of metal in his hand intently. It disgruntled her slightly that a normal human was here and listening in on the discussion, but since he had literally beaten her Rage collective asses into the ground, she would make an exception. Wash-sensei, you said that you recognize that metal, right? What can you tell us about it? Wash looked up and blinked at all the eyes staring at him before he spoke. Oh, sorry. It's just I didn't think I would ever see this kind of metal here. What kind of metal? Kiba asked as he looked at the small chip. It was really unassuming. The only thing that was really strange was the strange way it seemed to glow a bright silvery light. Well, Wash started as he gathered his thoughts. This type metal is just common steel, but the strange way it was forged is concurrent to only one nation, Indishka. It can only be found made by the imperial blacksmiths in Indishka's capital, Paraval. Naruto frowned at that. What is an indie weapon doing here? For that matter, how do you know it was made in Indishka? The way the metal is so naturally smooth, for one thing. The way Indies make their weapons and armor is by going into their forests and finding a decent sized and thickened tree NCH, cutting it down, whittling and smoothing it out, then forging the weapon around it. Same for their armor, only with bark. Because of this, no two weapons or armor made by an Indie are alike. Wash explained as he held up the metal to the light. You can also tell by the shine of the metal as well. During the forging process, they pour acidic Deathclaw blood over the metal to give it a more polished and refined sheen. Carla Warner gave them all a flat look as she spoke louder. There was more. Naruto blinked and gave a sheepish smile as he waved his arm at her to continue, while Kiba pestered Wash for more information on Indie sword forging. Sorry, continue. What were you going to say? The woman just sighed as she spoke again. The names of Raina's new allies. Seeing she had all of their attention on her now, she continued. The first one was named Tenran, and the second was named Wolf. It was silent as a grave as a sudden empty feeling washed over them all, coming directly from Naruto, who had the evilest of looks on his face as he glared at Carla Warner. He started out speaking normally, but then began to change midway through, even as his eye changed to the cross-shaped ones he normally had when he used Kaguya's chakra, turning into what Midlet had dubbed on the way to the Orc Club room, his empty voice. Did you just say Wolf? The woman just nodded, not trusting her voice, while Wash looked far more serious than he had been a minute ago. If it really is Wolf, which is highly unlikely, then the chances of us putting an end to this are very, very slim. His eyes turned frigidly cold as he spoke again. Then you're going to need to approach this very, very carefully, Rias. Rias had known that Naruto and this Wolf had a very bad history, but the way Naruto was seething in hatred made her worry for him. Wash-sensei, how exactly is Wolf such a danger? What makes him so dangerous? It was Wash who answered, his iron voice not changing in the slightest. Wolf used to be a scientist for the Tyro Research and Development Department. His main focus was the creation of biological weapons to assist Ryzen's Dead Echo in combating Indiashka's Inquisition force made entirely of biologically weaponized soldiers. Eventually, he became obsessed with attaining all of the knowledge in the world and began to experiment on people. Young or old, he thought that if he could manipulate organic mass right, he could create a serum that would make him immortal, giving him time to pursue his ambitions. However, he made a rather large, if single, mistake in doing so. He pissed off a man named Orochimaru, who was the head of the research department. Orochimaru is, and always will be, a sick monster, but he at least knew when to draw the line and rein in his horrific tendencies if it didn't. Meet Ryzen's demands for tools to use in his war. When Ryzen found out that Wolf was using his resources and citizens to further his own selfish goals, he ordered Orochimaru to kill him in the most painful way possible. But Wolf, being the tricky and cunning bastard he is, managed to escape by the skin of his teeth with his research, escaping to the neutral buffer countries where the bulk of the war is being fought, hiding and waiting for the chance to continue his research. He spent about 3 years consolidating what little power he had when he suddenly dropped off the map. He resurfaced a few years ago, having snuck into the executioner's headquarters and kidnapped 2 young Jinchuriki, one of which was Naruto, and the other the Jinchuriki of the newly discovered Zero-T. Ailes Chakra. Everyone looked at the now stoically silent blonde as he glared angrily at the floor. It was Akano who spoke up next. I thought that there were only 10. Wash laughed a bit to lighten the mood. So did we. Anyways, after spending 3 months searching, we managed to find Naruto half dead and scarred while Valve and the other Jinchuriki were gone. Akano spared Naruto a small glance to see his face still set in the stone-cold glare of fury and hate, eyes trying to burn a hole in the floor. She hadn't known he had been through that. Feeling slightly bad, she hadn't exactly asked how he even lost his eye. But, now that she really thought about it, did she really know anything about the young blonde? Yes. He hadn't really opened up to anyone aside from her and to a lesser degree Koneko. As for the blonde himself, he felt a lot of shame at having to admit to being captured. It was a very sore subject for him and a badge of shame to his reputation as an executioner. He never, ever spoke of his time being held by the sadistic bastard, and if given the option he would never speak of it, too. On another note, Rias said suddenly, hoping to change the tense atmosphere from the recent revelations. Since Naruto has decided to bring the 2 of you here offering sanctuary, then it's only fair that he is ultimately responsible for your actions. They tossed a small key to Naruto, who caught it with a curious look that had taken over for his previous stoic one. That key is to an apartment about 3 blocks away from the school. That's where you will be staying from now on. I can't keep letting you sleep in the clubhouse. Please don't abuse this new freedom, okay? And make sure that those 2 understand I'm placing a lot of trust in 'em as well. The Gremory heir didn't know it, but this was one of the very few gifts he had ever received in his 12 years of life. He would never take advantage of having it. Thank you, Rias. And don't worry, I'll make sure that they behave. Carla Warner raised an eyebrow at that, but smirked at the look that Akano sent her before a really funny idea entered her head. Oh, do you really think you're capable of taming me, Naruto? Well, from what I've seen, you may just have the strength and power to do so. Maybe if you play your cards right, I'll give you the chance. As the buxom woman was saying this, she had progressively pressed her large chest into the back of Naruto's head, a seductive smile on her face as she did so. Silently laughing at the large blush on his cheeks, Akano narrowed her eyes and stood from her spot before standing in front of Carla Warner, subsequently pushing her large chest into the shorter blonde's face as well. She glared angrily at Carla Warner as a silent conversation passed between them that went something like this. Stay away from Naruto, bitch. Why don't you make me? You would like that, wouldn't you? Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? All the while Mittelt was glaring darkly at the 2 girls while she silently brooded at having such a small chest, unknowingly sharing the same mindset of Kaneko as well. Stupid big-chested cows. And again, Rias thought in exasperation, another reason she wished she had never gotten her evil pieces. Choosing to ignore the background fuming and glaring, Rias looked at Naruto. Akano will be staying with you, Naruto, to ensure nothing untoward happens to you. Naruto just gave a thumbs up as his head was still trapped between the 2 large chests. XXX line break 2 days later. If he were completely honest with himself, Naruto would admit to having bonded and connected to Issei far better than he did Kiba. It wasn't that he disliked his fellow blonde, he just didn't really have anything to talk or bond about. And secretly, Naruto felt a bit miffed that he wasn't the only blonde in the group. For Issei, though, the 2 bonded over their relative newness in regards to being devils, with each having come to the agreement of if Naruto taught Issei what he needed to know right at that moment to not look like an ignorant fool, while Issei taught Naruto how to better understand his emotions and how to act like a normal person. So far, things had gone well, and both males found themselves having something of a brotherly relationship. Currently, however, Naruto and Issei were just getting finished with Issei's first contract. And, in the blonde's opinion, it had gone far better than his. And although it did lead to him getting a repeat contract, it was still rather humiliating to him. XXX flashback XXX. Naruto tried his best not to let his discomfort show as he stood in his client's apartment. He honestly had no idea that when he had been summoned he would wind up being used as a model for his client's new clothing line. From the reaction she had given when she saw him, or more specifically his rather short and thin size, he was apparently perfect for it. And then she had dressed him in what had to be the most humiliating outfit ever. It was a simple one-piece pajama suit that had been made to look like a large dog. It was white with black spots all over, leaving his feet bare, with a hood at the back that when pulled over his head, caused it to look like a dog had swallowed him. As he was forced to pose for picture after picture, he had no clue that his client made a mental note of his cuteness, and had plans to share it with her other 30-year-old, childless, single friends. Pretty soon afterwards, Naruto became known throughout Kuo as the #1 go-to if you needed so. Mething for boys modeled. XXX end flashback XXX. Yeah. Naruto had sworn never to tell any person he would ever see that was from the elemental nations about it. As they were walking back to the club room, as Issei was incapable of teleporting them and Naruto was deemed to be responsible to handle the power of teleportation, the two were in a deep discussion about a topic that many people argued over. One that would likely go down in history. Naruto, as your friend, I feel the need to inform you that you are wrong. Strawberry Pocky is far better than chocolate Pocky, Issei tried to explain calmly. And I'm telling you that chocolate Pocky is the best and strawberry Pocky sucks, Naruto countered. They had been arguing over this for over an hour now with no end in sight. Issei took a breath and let it out through his nose. How did he prove strawberry was the best? Why don't we leave it to Bushu to decide? Naruto just shook his head. No. Rias is too biased when it comes to you because she likes you more. Why not Koneko? She's eaten all kinds of treats. Issei just shook his head as well. No. Koneko is too biased against me. She hates my guts. Before Naruto could suggest another neutral party to intervene, Issei was suddenly knocked to the ground by a figure wearing a nun's habit. She had long blonde hair and kind green eyes that did very little to hide how sorry she was about running into Issei. I'm so sorry. I didn't look where I was going. Issei blushed a bit in embarrassment and just gave a friendly smile. Hey, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. Naruto snorted and mumbled under his breath. Yeah, especially Issei. Said boy just glared at Naruto for reminding him of his failures when it came to magic. He had absolutely no skill in magic. Not cool, dude. It's not a nice to make fun of your friends. The girl stuttered as she fidgeted now that she was standing properly. Naruto rolled his eyes and turned to Issei. Hey, listen, you deal with this while I go home. If I'm not back soon, then I won't get any dinner and Akano is making red bean soup. And, Naruto thought, I have to speak with Kega about why my destruction changed so dramatically. It never acted the way it did against Donosike before. You see, when Naruto originally got destruction, it was as a series of complex tattoos that extended from his shoulder to the palm of his right hand. The tattoos acted as focal lanes for his chakra to go, forming in the palm of his hand in the form of an orb that could be used to destroy anything. If he was feeling the need for mass destruction, it could also be released as a pulse that devastated the area affected. The best comparison he had was of that one guy from that anime Rias watched all the time, Fairy Tail, named Gildarts. Naruto shook those thoughts away and began walking home, waving at the two people as he did. Issei sighed. Even if he had access to his emotions now, Naruto was still very much unable to fully connect emotionally to people. It made it difficult for him to meet and get along with new people, and it was something he had been ordered by Rias to work with him on. Sorry about Naruto. He's just not very good with people. It's fine. I'm not offended. Oh. By the way, my name is Asia Argento. It's nice to meet you. said the now named Asia with a happy and warm smile. Issei laughed a bit. My name's Issei Hyodo. It's nice to meet you, too, Asia. Now, can I ask what you were doing running around like that? Asia smiled, already comfortable with Issei, as she said, well, I was waiting for some friends of mine to find me or I find them, and was wandering around until one or the other happened, but I think I got a bit lost. Then I guess we can be lost together, huh? Issei smiled and said, XXX line break XXX. It was interesting living with 3 girls, Naruto mused as he entered the apartment Rias had given him. Apparently, there were different rules here than there was at school, and he had tried to follow them as best he could. It was fairly easy to decide who did the household chores. Naruto handled the cleaning, Akano the cooking, Midna did the dishes after dinner, and Kalawana was in charge of laundry. All of them were in charge of each of their individual rooms, which worked out fine for all of them. As he entered his home, Naruto examined the furnishings. It was a normal apartment with a long couch and love seat, an armchair, and a nice-sized coffee table. On the wall was a large TV that was currently on Midna's favorite show, which was something about a magical girl called Leviathan. He smiled slightly as he heard the 3 girls all speaking in civil tones. It was so good to have a home. Naruto sighed happily as he, Midna, and Koneko ate the plate of chocolate chip cookies Akano had made. Say what you will about her and her strange obsession with BDSM, but she was a damn fine cook. Currently, he and the rest of Rias's peerage, alongside the 2 fallen angels and Wash, who claimed he couldn't allow so many students together without teacher supervision, were in the Orc Club room listen. Issei and Rias fight over the brunette's newest friend potential love interest. What had happened was Issei had taken Asia through the park after a few days of getting to know her, the same one he got tortured and murdered in, when they were attacked. Again, thankfully Valperin weren't there, and the worst Issei got was a stab in the gut which healed very, very quickly thanks to some help from Rias. After they got back, Issei demanded that they go and save Asia, while Rias said that they shouldn't waste time and resources on basically a lost cause. Issei was proclaiming loudly that she wasn't a lost cause and had a sacred gear, that even if it went against her wishes she could be reincarnated and never have to be alone again. Rias had become so frustrated with him that she said if he went after her, then he was declaring himself a stray dev. And to not expect mercy from her. He had to snort at that, quietly so no heard him. Rias may have been an heiress to a powerful devil family, but she didn't have the bearing or demeanor to command just yet. Not like his personal hero from the elemental nations, Mangetsu Hazuka. Mangetsu was the kind of man who you respected on sight, as he didn't accept any kind of weakness or when it came to failure or quitting. He commanded with an iron and ruthless fist that wasn't tight enough to crush the people under his command, but firm enough to know that if pushed, you were dead. He had taken by force, quite literally, the executioner subgroup known as the 7 Swordsmen of the Bloody Mist from its previous leader. And since then their mission completion rate went up by at least 40 to 50%. And while at first the other members didn't particularly respect the lean, soft-spoken, feminine-looking, kind man, they changed their tune when he had his own brother flayed, gutted, and hung from the gatepost of the Tra. Inning camp under his command as a message, especially after his brother had repeatedly made it known that he thought Mangetsu was weak. Naruto had only ever met the man once in his life, but he had been stupefied by the fact that such a soft-spoken man could be so cruel and heartless one moment, kind and compassionate the next. Yeah, if Rias had any kind of bearing Mangetsu had, Issei would never have even thought of defying her. But then again, Mangetsu only got that bearing after a little over 20 years in the executioners. Give them a break. They didn't have the never-ending resources or unwavering and absolute loyalty that Tyros and Indishka had. They literally had a mountain headquarters and some hidden bases where children were trained and then sent to the mountain headquarters. They had to supply their own food, weaponry, armor, and other such things on their own. Granted, they made a lot of money doing the most basic of their jobs, that is, hunting criminals and killing them, but it also took a lot of money to tear everything going. But in a world where war was an everyday occurrence, and the fact that someone, somewhere, wanted another person or persons dead made them very needed. Back to the story. Naruto sighed as Rias and Akano left. Apparently, while he had been thinking about home, Rias had decided she wasn't going to deal with Issei anymore and left. Looking at his friend, Naruto noted the set of his jaw and inwardly smiled at him. Issei hadn't come a very long way in his training, but he did uncover his sacred gear, a weird gauntlet that was red and had a large green gem in it. Naruto didn't know just what it did, but he was sure it would give Issei an edge. Issei shook with anger as he clenched his fist. His eyes hardened into a look that Naruto had seen in tyrant soldiers when they saw friends or family in trouble. Ha! It looked like Issei had a bit of steel in him. I don't know about you guys, but what Bushu just said was, we can't just let that sadistic bastard Valpa take her sacred gear. We need to save her. I know I'm not exactly all that close to you guys, and that you have no reason to help me, but please. Asia is innocent in all of this. Koneko spoke up in the same monotone she always had after a few moments of silent chewing, finishing her last cookie. Issei, you're a perverted idiot, but I'll help you. Naruto looked at her in curiosity as Kiba agreed to go as well, making him snort when they looked at him expectantly. Do you really think I'm going to let you guys fight Valpa and Tannen on your own? Hell no, they would tear you apart. Count me, and by extension Mittelt and Carla Warner, in. Hey, Mittelt snapped, why do we have to go? Naruto narrowed his eyes and gave them a smirk. Consider it the chance to take your revenge against Valpa for everything he's done so far. The two considered it for a moment and then nodded, replying at the same time. We'll do it. As for Wash, he was getting a bit fed up with the melodrama and thrust his hands in the air in exasperation. Seriously, you're really doing this to me? If I don't go, then I'm a complete, if I do go, I might have to fight both Wolf and Tenran. How the am I supposed to come out at the top on this? By coming along, useless sensei. Kaneko stated bluntly. What? She didn't like Wash. He looked way too flaky to her, despite him being a teacher. She ignored the dry stare she received from him. She wouldn't be changing her mind anytime soon, so he could stop with the look. Damn it, Wash said as he stood. He might as well go. It would be bad karma on him if they all died and he didn't at least try to help them. Fine, I'll go, but don't think it's because I want to save this Africa girl. I could give less than half a, about her. I'm only going so that if you die, I can at least tell Ronaldo I did my best to help. Naruto shook his head at Wash. The man was terrible with names and could barely remember his name. It took him several months to even get it right half the time. XXX line break XXX. Wolf grinned as he looked at the blonde girl Reiner had collected earlier that day. He had waited a long time for the chance to study a sacred gear, so finally getting a subject he could test was a bit exciting for High. He licked his lips as he watched her from the shadows. If he did good here, then his master would no doubt reward him for a job well done. If he played his cards right, he might be given the chance to usurp that little bastard as his right-hand man. But, he thought as his grin turned to a frown, his master wanted him back that night to report, leaving only Tenran to make sure everything went off without a hitch. Normally that wouldn't be very bad, if only for the fact that Tenran had killed or crippled beyond repair most of the people who would have acted as guards out of boredom, leaving only the large man, Reiner, and a handful of exorcists to ensure everything went off without a hitch. Oh. Well, Tenran was more than capable of killing anyone who got too close. He just worried he might do something foolish, like kill the girl before everything was done. Tenran, he called as he walked towards him, trying not to throw up at the smell of the rotting organs his armor was covered in. How could he stand the smell? Didn't he wash his armor at all? And for that matter, why was he hitting his head against the wall? Make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. If you fail, not only will I be punished severely, but you as well. The large man studied Wolf for a moment and then snorted in disdain. Weakling, so afraid of failure. If you were a real warrior, then maybe you would realize that I have this more than handled. Now, unless you have something good to talk about, shut up and let me prepare for battle. Ah, so, that was what he was doing. Turning and repressing a snarl of anger, Wolf pushed a hand through his hair with a frown. Something was telling him he should stay here and make sure that things went smoothly. It was that same something that had let him escape from Tyras all those years ago, and it had never failed him before. Oh. Well, he thought as he left the building. It wasn't like Tenran would fail, right? XXX line break XXX. Naruto and his shadow clones all surrounded the church, eyeing it warily as they did. His sense was screaming at him that something big and dangerous was in there. He wasn't entirely keen about finding out what it was. Naruto just sighed as he stood in his tree, finding it stupid to be hiding in it. Both Wolf and Tenran were very good at sensing and hiding from people. They had to be. After all, they were some of the most wanted people in the world. Chances are both had already sensed him and prepared to fight. He just hoped Issei didn't do anything too stupid and try to fight them on his own. He wasn't strong enough for that yet. He tensed as the doors to the church opened and a hulking figure walked out. He stood at least over 10 feet in height, which made him Tenran despite Midori saying he wasn't that big and argued that he was only 7. His armor was blood-red plates that covered his chest, back, and arms, while around his waist was a red sash-like cloth that had armor on it. He had no shoes that he could see and on his head was a smooth red helm that covered his head entirely. In his hand was a massive war club that had 3 giant stone-like rings around it, each one thick and heavy. Naruto mentally prepared himself when Tenran spoke in the deep and steady voice that barely hid his glee for the coming battle. Come out, little wolf. I know you're there. I can sense you. There's no use hiding. Let us see who is truly the superior warrior, the little wolf or the great bear. He took a breath and jumped down from the tree branch, hitting the ground without a single sound. Walking as calmly as possible, Naruto spoke to the others through his earpiece that he had been given by Kiba to keep in touch. Guys, wait for my signal before rushing the church. I'm going to lure Tenran away and give you guys a shot. But once I do, don't waste it. Just as he passed the tree line, Naruto felt more than saw Tenran's beady, battle-mad eyes immediately hone in on him. Shaking the feeling of dread that filled him as he walked closer and closer to the massive man, he took a breath. He wasn't afraid to die. No, dying didn't scare him. What did, though, was the fact that if his plan didn't work, then Tenran wouldn't even hesitate to obliterate him, his friends, and the 100 years and Akeno down, only to do the same to them as well. Since his emotions had returned, he had found himself spending more of and enjoying the time he got to with his fellow peerage members. Never in his life had he ever felt as wanted by anyone as they did, and even though his trust in Rias had basically been shattered into a million pieces, he still cared for her to as much an extent as he could. Even if it killed him, he wouldn't let anyone hurt them. Even if he was torn apart, had his legs ripped off, his arms cut off, his eyes gouged out, his tongue removed and was beheaded, he would crawl from whatever death held him and destroy anything that threatened them. Because now he was a king on a throne surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him. And for that, he would kill even gods to save them. So, as he got closer and closer to Tenran, he felt his confidence grow. Newfound strength entering him as he stopped not even 10 feet from the massive man. Tenran eyed him for a moment, his grin small and psychotic as he began to chuckle. Truly, you are the most brave of men, little wolf, as many men far greater and far stronger than you have faced me and died just from seeing me. Warriors many times your size and strength have died by my favorite war club, Tartarus, and yet here you stand unafraid and with the eyes of a true warrior. Tell me, little wolf, what is the name of my next opponent on my road to the last battlefield? Naruto looked up at the man and began to speak after a moment. I am the one who is called Naruto, soldier under the heiress of the Gremory clan. I am also the one who challenges you. Bi stared down at him seriously at that. A challenge? Hey, you do know, boy, that the Tyran custom of challenge is a very serious matter. That it is a fight to the death, correct? That I have never lost. The blonde just smirked confidently. Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? Tenran growled lowly as he shifted his club into a two-handed hold. I am going to enjoy crushing you to dust. Naruto just had shifted so he could more easily move left or right around the massive man. That's if you can. The two stilled as the air became silent, waiting for the other to make a move. Naruto knew if he made the first move, Tenran would win. The man was well known to be incredibly strong. If he made even one mistake and took a single hit with that club, it was all over for him. Despite his healing, Tenran swung hard enough that even the hardest material Naruto knew of, Indishika steel, shattered like glass. Suddenly, Tenran moved, charging at Naruto with his shoulder in an incredibly fast dash that he barely avoided, and then retaliated by sending a single bullet of chakra at his skull. The massive man vanished in a flash of speed and appeared above him, bringing his club downwards toward him at a blinding pace. Twisting, Naruto latched onto the metal of the weapon and held on for dear life as it slammed into the ground, causing a 20-feet wide and 6-foot deep crater to form in the earth. Grabbing the larger man's shoulder, Naruto got him in a lock that would hold him for just long enough to get the others into the church. Guys, run. Get into the church and find Asia. I've got Tenran. Said man turned and watched as several others burst into the clearing, making him snarl in fury before grabbing Naruto with his free hand and sending him to the ground, stomping hard on his stomach, making the blonde spit out blood as his lower intestines almost liquefied under the pressure. Insignificant shit. Bringing Tartarus up and then down, Tenran was disappointed to hear the sound of it striking the ground, while Naruto managed to pry the larger man's foot off of him just in time. Bringing one of the kunai from his tool pouch at his side, Naruto jammed the sharp blade deep into the kneecap of the bull-like man. Rolling to dodge a wild counter, Naruto took a minute to assess what he had to work with. Using Respira would be a bad idea. Tenran was too fast and agile for a man his size to be caught by it, and Naruto could only hold it for a few minutes, tops. Destruction was out, as well. It took too much chakra and was too unreliable to use in a battle like this. Not to mention it would require him to have time to regrow his arm after using it. Shadow clones and swarming would just be a waste of chakra on his part, as they wouldn't really do much to the man other than give him more than one target to swing at. Not to mention they would all be destroyed in one swing, if those two craters were anything to go by. Damn it, he swore as Tenran recovered enough to charge again, causing the blonde to dodge to the left. He needed time to come up with a strategy. The only one he could really think of was using Kaguya's chakra, and that left him drained after each use, meaning he wouldn't be able to assist the others if he beat Tenran with it. Closing his eyes, he made the decision and powered up into his 10 Tails chakra mode, or Zsei called it, the Okami Wolf God Cloak. Opening his one eye, Naruto glared angrily at the now grinning Tenran. Don't expect to leave this battlefield, Tenran. I won't show any mercy. Tenran let an even larger grin show as he dropped his club for a moment, leaving a large dent in the ground as he did so. He began to take his armor off, each piece being thrown to the side and leaving an even bigger crater and the last, until he was bare-chested, showing the massive amount of muscle on his body. Good, good. Now I won't have to hold back anymore. No more slow and steady. Speed. Fast. Faster. Show me the way to the last battle, Naruto. Show me the path to Nirvana. And then he was gone. A blink and suddenly Naruto was flying back through several trees as his chest screamed in agony. Sliding across the ground for a bit, Naruto barely rolled out of the way as Tenran's massive foot cratered the ground his head was at. Zipping away in a flash of light, Naruto slid to a stop and glared at the man, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth as he did. Yeah, he was in for a long fight that night. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.